LLC, application number R13-3713. With me tonight is staff from the DEP's Division of Air Quality, including Division Director Laura Crowder, Deputy Director James Robertson, New Source Review Program Manager Joe Kessler, Permit Engineer Joe Williams, as well as staff from our Compliance and Enforcement section, including Regional Supervisor Brian Denbach, Inspectors Carl Denninger and Chris Scanlon. The purpose for this public meeting is to provide information and answer questions related to the air quality issues and topics relevant to fundamental data's application ahead of our virtual public hearing on July 17th. Now, we understand that folks may have questions, concerns about a number of different issues, such as water use or discharges, zoning issues, site selection issues, economics, road traffic. These are all very important topics and issues and warrant further discussion. But please note that those issues and others fall either outside the jurisdiction or the Division of Air Quality or the DEP as a whole. There may be other permitting opportunities for folks to comment and have further discussion about that with our agency. But tonight, our focus here is the air quality topics related to the application.
Would you repeat again what is out of the scope of tonight's meeting?
Sure, just a few examples that from basically comments we received, things such as water use and discharges, zoning, economics, site selection, zoning, and road traffic. Now, the official comment period ends at 5 p.m. on Friday, July 18th, 2025. Written comments can be submitted to the DEP at any point until that deadline, and the contact information for submitting comments will be shared shortly, although I'm not sure that really needs to be done after all the comments you received so far. If you would like to register for the virtual hearing, you can get with Nicole Ernest by the front door. She can help you get signed up. Please note that no decision has been made on the application and will not be made until after the close of the public comment period. All comments submitted to the agency, oral or written, will be reviewed and considered by staff prior to taking final action on the application. Our agenda for this, as I mentioned, our purpose here is to provide information and answer questions relative to fundamental data and air quality from the application. We'll begin with a presentation, and you'll hear from Mr. Kessler and Mr. Williams. They'll provide information on the DAQ's permitting process, what our jurisdiction is, what the process can and cannot take into consideration, next steps, things like that. And then we'll go over some technical details related to fundamental data application. After the presentation, we'll take questions. And so we ask that you please hold any questions you may have until that time. We'll call on those who pre-registered and indicated they had a question first, followed by those who signed up to ask a question on the sign-in sheet and door, and then we'll open the floor further. We have a podium set up and a microphone, and we ask that if you have a question, when you come up, that's when you go to ask your question. If for some reason you can't, let us know. We'll bring a mic to you. I know folks may have mobility issues, or it may just be hard to get from one end to the other. And again, we do have a lot of folks signed up to ask questions already. I think we have about 100 so far, and probably more at this point. So we're going to ask if you ask one question, start out. We'll provide a response, and then we'll move on to the next person. If we have time, we can circle back to allow for additional questions. In addition to that, we're going to do our best to carve out time to allow for additional comments if possible. But I want to reiterate that we have a virtual hearing set up just to accept the official comments, and you can also submit your comments in writing and close the comment. To ensure that we successfully achieve the purpose of this meeting, we ask that everyone be respectful and consider each other by refraining from using foul language and from name calling and interrupting others while they're speaking. We also ask that you keep your comments or questions on the topic of this application and related air quality issues that are trying to get for this discussion. Thank you for bearing with me as opening remarks and instructions. At this point, I'll now turn the floor over to New Source Review Program Manager Joe Kessler. Joe?
Yes.
You all cannot see it, but there's a rainbow outside.
All right, thank you, Terry. So, as Terry was saying, my name is Joe Kessler.
Mouth of the mic, please.
Is that better? All right, not bad. All right. So, again, my name is Joe Kessler.
Louder, louder.
Is that better? Sorry, it wasn't me, the person who's microphone. So let's start over again. Thank you, Terry. So my name is Joe Kessler, and I'm the NSR Program Manager for the Division of Air Quality. Now, what that means real quick, the NSR, and that means News Source Review. So my job is to manage a staff of currently 9 engineers that handles all air applications, air permit applications in the state of West Virginia that involve new sources or modifications. So Jared works for me, and he's gonna be taking over here in just a minute, but there's a few things I want to start out with and talk about before I turn it over to him. So one too far. So quick outline of the presentation this evening. Start off with this introduction of Terry and myself. And then I'm gonna handle this next bullet point. And what I'm gonna do is talk a little bit about the permitting process in general. And try to place the air permit process in context of sort of the larger national air quality strategy. And the reason I do this is a lot of you are very educated, I know, on environmental practice and what permitting is in air permitting. But I know some of you probably this is your first time sort of entering into this discussion and learning about these issues. And having done this for almost 30 years, talking to a lot of people, oftentimes people think that permitting is kind of a self-contained, it represents all of the whole process of regulating air emissions. And that's far from the truth. It's but one small part of the bigger strategy. So once you see air permitting in the proper context, I think it'll help you understand, what we're doing here and how our review ties into the whole program and what we're trying to accomplish. So I came up with this slide years ago, and it does most of the work visually, but I will walk through it as quick as I can. I know we have a lot to get through tonight. But what it tries to show is air permitting in context of this larger strategy for regulating air quality in the United States. So where do we get the authority to regulate air quality? Well, it starts with an act of Congress, specifically the Clean Air Act. The first Clean Air Act, I think, was signed into law in 1963. It was rather toothless, but the subsequent amendments in 1970, 1977, further in the 90s, gave it a lot more substance. And part of the Clean Air Act, or the most important part, was to give the EPA the mandate to protect public health and welfare as it relates to air quality. And the way that they do that is by coming up with a set of national ambient air quality standards for certain pollutants that
are designed to protect the public health and welfare. Jerry will be getting into more of what that means specifically in a little bit. And those are designed to be determined using science, doctors, epidemiologists, other health officials, based on the most recent studies, they come up with these standards. And that really is the key to this whole system, are those national ambient air quality standards. Now, they often get litigated. They often get politicized from one administration to another. But the design is that they're based on science and they're based on health professionals that come up with these standards. So once they're set in place and they change over time, some of you I know have followed the recent changes in the PM5 standards and the litigation and the change in those. And all the turmoil that comes when they try to change these standards. However, once they're in place, the EPA requires the states to come up with a set of rules to implement these standards. So basically, they tell the states, you need to come up with a set of rules that either keeps existing areas that are meeting these standards compliant with them, or if they're not meeting these standards, you have to come up with a plan of getting back into compliance with these standards. And that's rather simplified, but in essence, that's what they're tasking the states to do. So some of you have just entered into this discussion, you looked at the fact sheet evaluation, and you see 45 CSR 13 and 45 CSR 2. These are all legislative rules that are part of our implementation plan that are designed, in essence, at the most basic level, to keep the state in compliance with these national ambient air quality standards. Now, these rules can cover a lot of different things. They may target specific industries. They may target specific facility types, specific pollutants. There's a bunch of them. But a part of all the state implementation plans, not just continual, have permitting plans. Rules that specifically administer permitting programs. And there are several of those, I'll go through those quickly. But part of that suite of rules, collectively called the state implementation plan, are requirements for minor source permitting. That's why we're here. So you can follow that chain. We're talking about specific facility permitting and requirements that essentially you can follow all the way back up to the Clean Air Act. Designed in this full system to keep the state in compliance with these national ambient air quality standards. Now that's basically simplified to give you an idea of how the basic program works. But that's not even the end either. It's not just permitting and we're done. We also have inspectors, some of which are sitting here in the front row. Their job is to go out all across the state and make sure these facilities are in compliance with these permits and other federal rules that apply outside of permit. So, simplify, but hopefully very quickly get you an idea that while permitting is extremely important, it is really just one part of this larger program. So I'm not going to touch on this too much, but because the NACs are so important, I just want to say a couple of things. Again, Jerry's going to go into more detail on some of the NACs, but they're specific to certain pollutants that is listed. Hazardous air pollutants are not part, do not have national ambient air quality standards. They're regulated differently. So there's no set standard, there's no set metric for those pollutants defined as hazardous air pollutants. They have a whole separate system of rules, federal rules that apply usually, that target specific industries and specific compounds. Now, usually, not always, but most of the time, designations of an area, whether or not they're meeting or not meeting those national ambient air quality standards, are by counties Sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's tax districts, but most often it's by county. Tucker County is classified as in attainment with the National Air Quality Standards. In fact, all of West Virginia is classified as in attainment. It always hasn't been that way. We've had to work hard to get it that way. And it's something we're proud of, and we want to continue.
What was the term you used again? It's classified as a.
In attainment, that just means compliant with. So to backtrack a little bit, those permitting programs I talked about within the state implementation plan. There's different types based on different types of sources, different size sources. But basically, permitting can be broken up into two major categories. The new source review permits and what we call Title V operating permits. We're not talking about Title V tonight. Those are permits that a source has to get after they start operating. What we're talking about tonight are new source review, a new source review permit that they have to get before they begin substantive construction. So it's often also called a pre-construction permit. So there are three types of those. Two classifications of major source permits and one classification of minor source permit. The major sources are broken up whether or not they're in attainment or in non-attainment. The fundamental data, as many of the comments that come in understand, they've applied for a minor source permit, so this was reviewed under the 45 CSR 13 rule, which handles new source construction for minor sources. So really now, if we dial down in to the permitting process itself, what does it accomplish? What are we trying to do in one of these minor source permit reviews? We've already talked about that this fundamental data is applicable to R13, 45 CSR 13. I won't go through all the applicability thresholds and everything, but basically for this fundamental data, what they propose, the threshold for minor and major is 100 tons. That's more strict than almost any other source. There's a specific list of sources that falls in to the 100-ton threshold classification. The proposed fundamental data facility is one of those, so it's actually much more strict to stay a minor source. We've already talked about that it's administered under Rule 13. So, key question, what does it do? What are we trying to do with a minor source permit? We simplify it into three main points on there. There's a lot of other factors and things involved, but basically, when we get an application in, we're trying to determine compliance with all applicable state and federal rules. So what's applicable to this proposed facility? Is what they're proposing going to be in compliance with those rules? And then, when you write a draft permit, you're coming up with language and requirements to determine compliance continuously within reason. A permit has to be workable. You can't have a permit for something that's impossible to do. And that's something that where the art form, I guess, of writing a permit comes. How do you write a permit that determines, that enforces compliance with certain rules that allows the company to operate? So that's the first bullet. What rules apply and how are they compliant? Will they be compliant? And we write requirements to keep them, to make sure that they stay compliant. Second is to inventory the emissions of a proposed facility. So they come in, you review the calculations. A lot of times it's collaboration and working with the company back and forth. I need this, I need that. some additional information to make sure that the emissions they propose are calculated correctly, so that we can be sure those applicability thresholds are correct. So that's determining those and inventorying those emissions of a potential source or proposed source. Also, again, when you write the permit, your job is to write requirements that enforces those limits that you're putting in the permit for those emissions. So that's the second main task. And then finally, the minor source program provides the framework for public participation. Just like it's public meeting, there's language in the rule concerning public meetings and notices, how many ads they have to run, what is the notice period. So that's laid out in the rule. So that's part of that process. So those are just three of the main points of what we're trying to accomplish when we do a minor source permit review or any permit review. Now, just as importantly, and Terry touched on this, what do we not have the authority to do in a minor source air permit review? We don't require a full environmental impact statement. Like FERC would, or you're building a pipeline or something like that. We don't, there's no requirement, we have no authority to require a review of water usage, of waste disposal, of non-air quality issues, and put that all together in one document and consider all of them together. We don't have any sort of holistic review. We just have the authority under the rule to look at air quality issues. Minor source reviews do not look at greenhouse gases. There's no authority under the minor source rule to do that. We don't require a cumulative impact analysis. It's not required and supported under a minor source review. And I won't jump into all these again, Terry mentioned them, but it is important. The majority of our comments do focus on very important. I'm not trying to de-emphasize it at all. Other impacts, from nuisance impacts, to economic impacts, to property values, to tourism, you've seen that one a lot in this. We do not have the authority or even the metrics to look at those types of issues when determining to when we review a permit. Same with benefits. 10,000 jobs, one job. Our focus is on those 3 bullet points before. So, again, I keep pointing that out, but it's not to try to de-emphasize those or to shirk responsibility. We just don't have these in the meeting. So, that concludes my piece of the puzzle. I'm gonna hand it off now to Jeremy, who's going to dive into the specifics of the project.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Terry. Thanks to Kenny Dodge for setting up the room for us at the meeting. I appreciate it. As Joe said, at this time, I'm going to get into the specifics of what the air quality permit application was for and the details of it. So on March 18th of this year, Fundamental Data did submit a 45 CSR 13 construction permit application. And when that application was submitted, the DEQ identified it as R13-3713. At that time, the DEQ also made that application available on our website for public review. As part of a air permit application for a construction permit, there are 2 essentially notice periods that go along with each application. There's a notice of application period
So when an applicant submits an application, they're required to publish a class one legal advertisement in the newspaper, local newspaper being affected, notifying the public that the application, was submitted. Fundamental, published that or published in the Department of Advocate on March 26th. There is also a second public notice period that begins after the DEQ has completed their preliminary review. So let's focus on that. So on that first notice period, so from the time that the application was submitted on March 18th until, the DEQ published their ad on June 18th, just to put this into context, the DEQ did receive 597 comments about this application. I would like to state though that those comments are inclusive of multiple or duplicate comments that we may have received. 305 of those 597 comments did request a public meeting. So as we were going through this process, we realized the importance of this application and how much impact that it would have on the area. So usually what we do is like we would publish the notice of comment period and make a statement that a public meeting could be requested. But since we already knew the importance of this, when we published our ad on June 18th of this year, we made notice that we were having this meeting tonight to provide information and to answer questions, and that we were also going to have a virtual public meeting on July 17th to accept comments at that time. I would like to stress that if you have already provided written comments or you intend to provide written comments prior to the July 17th meeting, it's not necessary to then join that meeting and read your comments that you've already submitted. However, I encourage anyone who wants to participate in that meeting to do so. But I just want to state that it's not, if you've already submitted written comments, you don't have to then do them orally at that virtual public meeting. I know we talked about, Terry talked about this, and Joe talked about this, but then, you know, also just because of, you know, I read every single comment that we received, and also every comment that we received prior to this permit going to the notice, I responded to and tried to go over the public comment procedure, and once we determined that we were having a meeting, to notify everyone of what of the meeting at that time. But just to talk about the non-air quality issues, things that we don't have control over, the zoning issues that may exist in your town, job creation, the economic viability of the project, strategic energy issues, non-air quality environmental impacts, noise pollution, light pollution, tourism, road traffic, nuisance issues, and water issues. And anytime that these subjects come up, we always encourage those that are interested in these topics to contact your local officials, whether it be, you know, town mayor, town commission, a county commission.
Right?
Excuse me?
They've been cut out of the process by HB 24P.
Yeah, we're gonna keep on going. We'll get to that when we get to the question part of it.
All right.
Alright. So, I started this off with like a project overview of what we're here to talk about tonight. And so, when fundamentals submit your application, they submit the application for a combustion turbine power facility located in Thomas. So So the combustion turbine power facility itself does the primary fuel that they want to combust in the turbines are natural gas. However, due to potential, issues as far as emergency issues go, if the natural gas becomes unavailable, they would need to use, diesel as backup during those time periods. So the turbines are dual fuel turbines, which could combust natural gas or diesel fuel. Also received hundreds of comments about this being a data center. And I know there's, some disagreements on whether it is or is not. However, the permit application is for a combustion turbine power facility and does not include a data center. The permit application is also not definitive on who the ultimate power user of the power that will be generated from the facility would be. So when you look at the maximum design heat input of the combustion turbines, that heat input is going to vary depending upon whether or not natural gas is being combusted or diesel fuel. So being combusted, the potential maximum design heat input of the facility would be 5,650 million BTU per hour. And when diesel is being combusted, the maximum design heat input would be 4,500 million BTU per hour. As far as emissions being controlled for the combustion turbines do utilize air pollution control devices. There's a selective catalytic reduction device that reduces the NOx emissions being emitted from the combustion turbines, and there's also a oxidation catalyst that reduces the carbon dioxide emissions that would be emitted from the units. The permit application also includes 3 diesel storage tanks and diesel truck unloading. All of the individual pollutant emissions outside of the greenhouse gases fall below the 100 tons per year threshold that you referenced earlier as far as the 45 CFR 13 minor permit. And detailed information on these topics are included in the engineering evaluation fact sheet that was made available on June 18th and is on our website, and also links were sent to all the people who commented prior to this permit going notice. So as far as who the end user of the power would be, that is not definitive at this time. However, I would like to state that not disclosing this information is not reason for denial of permit. However, I would like to say how the power will be utilized will affect whether or not fundamental will be required to obtain an acid rain permit or what its Title V status would be. So both of those processes are independent of this process. If it is determined that an acid rain permit is required, then that acid rain permit application must be submitted to the DEP 24 months prior to the unit going into operation. And as of today, we have not received an acid rain permit application for this facility. If the facility, I would like to go through this and we'll answer questions.
Repeat last.
Okay. Well, let me look for me right.
About the acid.
Okay, so if it's determined that an acid rain permit is required in this facility, then the acid rain permit must be submitted 24 months prior to the unit going into operation. And as I stated, as of today, we've received no application for that. Was that what you needed?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. So if it's determined that an acid rain permit is required, then that means that that the facility would also be subject to Title V. They would have to submit a Title V application as well. Title V applications are not due prior, or not required to be submitted prior to operation. Title V applications have to be submitted within 12 months after the facility goes into operation. And so because there was concern whether or not the facility, would be subject to the accident provisions, because because it was not definitive on who the final end user of power would be, we placed all the potential applicable regulations that would apply to that in the, draft permit itself, and those will be located, if you're taking notes, in permit condition 4.1.19. There were also a lot of comments about House Bill 2014. And so, as things that we have jurisdiction over and things that we don't, that particular bill has no effect on this air permitting process itself. So we have, I can't be a much place, but at the same time, I'll go this way. So this, I mean, for those who've not seen the overhead view of the facility, this image is included in the engineering evaluation fact sheet, under the subject matter site inspection. In the center of this photo, we have a pin dropped on where the Tucker County landfill is. So for those that are familiar with that, so that we can have like a place you can kind of see what it's in relation to. And then up at the top center is a pin where the proposed facility is. And then down in the bottom lower right is a pin where the Davis post office is, and then on the upper left is a pin where the Thomas post office is located. So for those still maybe not familiar of where that is, the site is located off of US 48. It is located, the site is accessible only by a private gate. And like I said, it's located behind where the landfill is and situated on a reclaimed coal mine.
What's the scale of the map?
I don't have an answer for you on that. I think it's gonna be shot here or and then drop the pins on it, so it's whatever the Google Earth image was when I did that. All right, so as Joe touched on, the NAAQS, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, in the state of West Virginia, all of the NAAQS are done at the county level. And as Joe said, all the counties in West Virginia, are currently in tenure. So as far as the National Ambient Air Quality Standards go, we have National Ambient Air Quality Standards for nitrogen oxides or NOx, carbon monoxide, ozone, particulate matter less than 10 microns in diameter, particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in diameter, sulfur dioxide, and lead. And Joe's slide touched a little bit on it, but we'll go more in detail. So essentially the NAAQS are established for two different sets of standards. There's the primary standards and secondary standards. The primary standards were developed to protect the public health, and that includes sensitive populations such as children, the elderly, asthmatics, and then you have a secondary set of standards, the NAAQS, which were developed to protect the public welfare, and that includes visibility, animals, crops, vegetation, and buildings. And so, the Division of Air Quality, they operate, we also have an air monitoring section, part of the visual quality. We don't have anyone here tonight in the air monitoring section, but I'm gonna talk about, this big, on a bigger picture. And then if we need to get into more detailed questions during the question and answer session, we can. But essentially, the visual quality does have an air monitoring section, and they do operate an air monitoring network throughout the state of West Virginia. And I just wanted to touch on it. There are 2 air monitoring sites that are located in Tucker County. There's one that's located in the Dolly Solid Government area, and it is an ozone monitor. And there's also one in Parsons. I'm sorry, Dolly Solids is a PM 2.5 monitor, and the one that's in Parsons is a ozone monitor. So the first one we're talking about is the one that's located in the Dolly Solids Wilderness area. This site is part of what's called the Interagency Monitoring of Protected Visual Environments, or the Improved Network. This site is located approximately 5 miles from the town of Thomas. The site has PM 2.5 data that is available that dates back to 1999. And the PM 2.5 values from that monitor are all within the acceptable maximums. The other site, the other running site that's located in Tucker County is a site located in Parsons. It's part of a Clean Air Status and Trends Network, or CASNet. There is a CASNet website. The website includes a dashboard for ozone, nitrogen deposition, and sulfur deposition. This particular air monitoring site is located approximately 10 miles from the town of Thomas. It has monitored for ozone since 1990, and the ozone values associated with that monitor are also all well within the maximum.
The one you were just talking about was the one.
Parsons, correct. Yeah, so Parsons is an ozone monitor, and it's about 10 miles from Thomas.
With these being minor stores, the new facility, the proposed facility being minor, this still fall under the classification for the wilderness area? First class,
I think if we can get through the presentation, I think as we get back to that, we can get more detail of those specific topics.
can you give me a yes or no?
I'm not sure that, I would rather wait the question and answer session so that I can fully enjoy it. All right, thank you. All right. This, as many of you know, this application was submitted with confidential business information. Anytime that an application is submitted that contains CBI, for the business information, or CBI, anytime that an application is submitted that has CBI, the applicant also has to submit a redacted copy that is made available for public review. Part of CBI, there has to be a justification as to why the information is CBI. And so as we were going through this process, going through the review and understanding the concern of the amount of information, so it's claimed CPI as part of this application. It was something that was turned over to the Office of General Counsel, the DEP, to review the information. So the CPI as part of this application contains information on the configuration of the facility, and technical information on the combustion turbines and the associated control devices with those. So as we were working through the process, like I said, we turned the information over to our Office of General Counsel. Our Office of General Counsel reached out to Fundamental with a letter that requested more information on the CPI justification. There was a response from Fundamental that addressed the issues that, they responded to the issues that we sent like a letter on, and then that information was reviewed by our legal counsel, to determine whether or not it met the two, confidential business information rules that the DEP has. For those that are interested in what those rules are, it's gonna be 45 CSR 31, which is confidential business information, and also 45 CSR 31B, which is a, interpretive rule of the DEP that deals with, the types and amounts of pollutants. As part of, 4531B, there's language in that particular regulation that allows the DEP to accept, non-confidential alternatives. And all of those are defined by regulatory definition. And this entire, we're talking right now, was included in detail in the engineering evaluation of fact sheet. Part of the non-confidential alternatives that are allowed under 45 CSR 31B are, aggregation, categorization, and emissions monitoring. And so on this slide here, I highlighted some of the, non-confidential alternatives that are included in the draft permit, which includes an aggregate hours of operation tracking, aggregate input limitation, aggregate emission limits, aggregate fuel throughputs, fuel categorization, and emission monitoring. And in the engineering evaluation and fact sheet that's available on our website, each one of these non-confidential alternatives that we're referencing here are in that document with the specific permit condition that utilizes those non-confidential alternatives. So as far as the project and what's been proposed, at the Ridgeline facility, combustion turbine facility is powered by combustion turbines that are equipped with heat recovery steam generators. And these heat recovery steam generators, generate steam by using the heat that's present in the exhaust gas. The heat recovery steam generators associated with these combustion turbines do not require any additional firing emissions, and there are no duct burners that are associated with these units. There's specific language in the permit that states all these topics, that no duct burner firing emissions allowed, and that, the generator itself cannot have any additional emissions. As I stated earlier, the combustion turbines are equipped with air pollution control devices for, NOx and CO. The primary fuel source, once again, is natural gas with the ability to fire diesel as a backup fuel. And there's storage tanks and diesel unloading. So this facility, as we stated, is the emissions that, are part of the review are less than 100 tons per year of the regulated air pollutants. When a facility requests that emissions are held below, like when they take a physical or operational restriction to limit their emissions below a certain emission threshold, that's what we call, a synthetic decliner. And so this is what, fundamentally proposed to be below the 100 ton threshold. When you have a synthetic monitor permit, you also then that result in, enhanced monitoring, enhanced certification, enhanced reporting to prove that those values are being met. The facility itself has the ability to operate on natural gas and diesel. So as part of this, they have to be able to prove that they have to keep track of their hours of when they're combusting natural gas, when they're combusting diesel. This has to be monitored continuously. And then those values they continue to monitor, they have to maintain records of total hours. And that includes the hours of each service, when they're burning natural gas, when they're burning diesel. And perform, keep a rolling 12-month total to ensure that the emissions stay below the major source threshold. This includes required hour meters, required, fuel meters, enhanced control device monitoring, and also performance testing on the turbines, which includes testing for NOx, testing for SO2, and testing for CO. So as part of every permit application, emission calculations have to be provided and verified that, the calculations are accurate. So we have, as I said earlier, we have combustion turbines, diesel storage tanks, diesel truck unloading, paved roadways, and future emissions that are associated with the permit application. The combustion turbines utilize manufacturer data for the criteria pollutants and what's called AP 42 for the hazardous air pollutants. AP 42 is a emission factor program that EPA sponsors, that depending upon, like, they have it for not just turbines, they have it for engines, they have it for paved roadways. Pretty much when you can think of a source, EPA has developed emission factors to estimate emissions when for a storage if manufacturer data is not available. For the diesel storage tanks and the application, they use a program called EPA Tanks 5.1. It's also a program that was developed by EPA. It's a long program where you utilize information on the tanks, tank construction, the color, the size, temperatures, pressures, tank contents. And so they use EPA Tanks 5.1 to estimate those emissions. The diesel truck unloading and paved roadways, AB 42 emissions were utilized to calculate those emissions. And for the future emissions, EPA also has for future emissions, it's called a protocol for equivalent emission estimates. And so those were the parameters that were utilized in estimating emissions to the source. So to go a little bit further into each one of those emission types, starting off with the combustion turbines, once again, the combust natural gas or diesel, hourly fuel consumption limits, maximum design heat input limits, and which results in aggregate hourly and annual permitted emission limits. When we talk about the storage tanks, we received a lot of comments about how the storage tank emissions were estimated, and that the storage tank emissions utilize meteorological data from Elkins and not Thomas. And I do recognize that, and I touched on it in the engineering evaluation fact sheet. We'll touch on it again here. When EPA Tanks 5.1 is utilized, EPA has went in and pre-populated weather data for a series of towns across the United States. Now, I'd also like to point out, before I go any further, that EPA Tanks 5.1 is available right now on the website, and that anyone can go in and utilize it. They can put in tank information, they can create location profiles, they can use different tank content samples. So if this is something that would interest you, I just want to let you know that that's available. So because of the concern about the data that was utilized from Elkins, and once again, the reason for that would be that in the state of West Virginia, there are only 5 pre-populated weather profiles available to pick from in Tank 5.1. So the applicant did choose Elkins because that was the closest location to the facility. But due to the concern that was expressed about that, I took it upon myself to go in and to create a, weather profile for the town of Thomas, where I went in and okay, these are the parameters that you need. I pulled those parameters from a national weather station and put those into the program, input the, contents of the tank, that where it's gonna be stored, turnovers, throughputs, things of that nature. And the result of that, well, that was step one. The other thing that I did, the DP also has a program that's called ProMax. And it is a very complicated, engineering modeling program that's used for a lot of different industries, such as the natural gas industry, the chemical industry, the power industry. And so, we have another engineer on staff who is extremely skilled at running the program. So I work with him so that he could then run these same values through the ProMax program, so that then we can compare the data. So if you take the information from Thomas, if you take the information from Elkins and then compare it to the information that was returned for the tanks in Thomas, and then once again returned for the tanks in Thomas using the ProMax analysis, the results of the Thomas located tanks and the results of the ProMax Thomas relocated tanks are actually lower than the results of what the tanks would be located in Elkins. And this is based upon elevation, it's based upon pressure, it's based upon temperature. So at that time, we made the determination that the information that was submitted as part of the application was acceptable. The diesel truck unloading, the way that those emission calculations are looked at is like you look at like how are the liquid being loaded. So that plays into it. The vapor pressure of the tank, the molecular weight of the liquids that are in the tank, and the temperature of the liquids that are being loaded. That all goes into the calculations on how those emissions are being determined. The plant roadways are based upon roadway type and operating type and truck type. And then the future emissions are based upon component counts of units at the facility, such as valves, flanges, opening and line, pressure relief valves, things of that nature. So, kind of staying on the topic of the meteorological conditions. The meteorological conditions that we discussed as far as the tank scope itself, the application did use the Elkins data. However, we went further and used the Thomas data for two different, we used the same program they used, and then we also used a more enhanced program. However, as some have stated that meteorological data from Elkins was used for the combustion turbines, and that is not true. The correct location for the combustion turbines were utilized in the emission calculations. So I kind of maybe got ahead of myself here, so we'll go through this slide fairly quickly. The EPA tank program that's utilized takes, I went over what that takes into consideration. And also went over the fact that already that we created a weather profile, tank 5.1 for Thomas, and then also ran that same weather profile in program. The diesel unloading, once again, diesel fuel has been proposed as a backup fuel at the facility. As far as the values associated with those fuel throughputs, there is a short-term combustion throughput, which would look at when the diesel fuel is being used at its maximum hourly value. And then there's also an annual throughput limit to, the storage tanks. And that value was based upon 15 million gallons per year. Let's, at this time, stop there for a second and talk about, there's been questions about, them using 15 million gallons a year of diesel fuel. Fundamental stated time and time again that the primary fuel source will be natural gas. And the diesel would only be used as a backup in case of a natural gas outage. There is no plan to run the, combustion turbines, like just to say, well, we're not using natural gas today, we're gonna use diesel. That's not the purpose here. Its purpose is a backup fuel. So if you look at, for those of you that are reviewed the emission calculations associated with the facility, you will see that, when you look at the natural gas emissions that are associated with the facility, that they were based upon, the maximum I need to put was in there, manufacturing data on, the hourly emissions. And then the determination of how many hours could be operated using the natural gas to not exceed the 100 ton per year threshold. And so you will see, I believe it's page 57 and 58 of the permit application. You'll see a value of like 61,320 hours, I believe, of time that the combustion turbines can be operated to not exceed that limit. Because diesel fuel, the potential for diesel fuel would exist, then it was determined that, how many hours could be operated using the diesel fuel, to stay below those limits. Those are not additive. And that is why you do not see numbers like that in the permit itself, because the possibility exists and is good prevalent that at any point in time during that 12-month period, that both fuels could be utilized. So establishing a value that says 61,000 hours would totally eliminate the ability to combust diesel, and then the same thing when we look at it from a diesel fuel perspective. So this table here represents the facility potential to emit that's associated with this application, and this table is in the engineering evaluation fact sheet, and also in the engineering evaluation fact sheet is a detailed breakdown of each of these component sources and how those numbers were arrived. Let's take that back up. Sorry about that.
Sorry, say that the calculation of not based on burning any equipment. Or I got to do for that. You, I know I said 100 tons per pollutant. The 6,000 hours.
So, okay, so if you were, like, if you were saying, okay, I'm just gonna burn natural gas and that's it, no diesel. How many hours could be operated to stay below the 100 ton per year threshold of any of the regulated pollutants to, and so the number of hours that would be a 61,320. And then the same thing, so the flip side, it said, okay, only gonna burn diesel, not gonna burn any natural gas at all. How many hours could that be? And so even though that's not the intention, looking at it from a worst case per pollutant basis, then you say, okay, if this operated at 25,000 hours per year for diesel fuel, when you would look at each individual pollutant of what that value would be, then let's say that like operating, using natural gas resulted in a NOx emission limit of 90 and a CO emission limit of 80. But then look at it from a diesel standpoint, that if you operated 25,000 hours and no natural gas, if you were like 85 and 85, So you would look at what's the higher pollutant of that particular fuel use. So it's possible that if combusting natural gas, that the NOx emissions may be higher, but than diesel, but maybe for when you combust diesel, the CO emissions are higher. So that's kind of like the correct. Yes.
And this diesel will be cycled through periodically and used, you bring it out, right?
There is a throughput limit in the permit of how much diesel can go through the storage tanks.
Good.
That throughput limit only got single 5 minutes.
That's long-term storage of diesel.
All right, we're gonna, so we can get to the questions, so we don't run out of time, and go, let's finish the thought, please, thank you.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's, I would just say that it's interesting, the approach that you guys are taking. Yeah, well, you know. It's anyhow,
We're just trying to present the information that you asked for.
we're grateful for that.
So, from the source determination standpoint, once again, this is considered synthetic minor because there are physical and operational limitations that are part of, this application. It does result in enhanced monitoring record keeping that otherwise would not occur. And I think it's important to state that fundamental cannot relax any of these synthetic minor limits and become a major store without retroactively obtaining the PSD permit for the facility. So for the greenhouse gas emissions, as Joe stated earlier, there's no state or federal statutory basis for these for minor sources. The Supreme Court has ruled that greenhouse gases alone cannot define sources of nature. So the air quality rules that apply to this facility are Rule 4, which deals with objectionable odors, Rule 13, which is the minor source committee rule, Rule 16, which is the new source performance standards. This incorporates any applicable federal standards that were the new source performance standards, and so this facility is subject to the federal air quality standard for subpart 4K for combustion turbines. Rule 17, which deals with fusion of particulate matter. Rule 22, which is the air quality management program, and Rule 40, which is the ozone season non-emissions for combustion turbines. There are also other potential rules that may apply, and this is all dependent upon whether or not the facility or how the final user of the power will be. And that's going to be State Rule 33, which is the gas main provisions. Rule 30, which is the Title V operating permit program. For federal regulations that may apply, it's going to be subpart TTTTA, which is standard performance for greenhouse gas emissions for modified coal-fired steam electric generating units and new construction, reconstruction of stationary combustion turbine electric generating units. Part 70, which is our State Rule 30 counterpart. Part 72, which is our State Rule 33 counterpart. And subpart 5D, which is the federal NOx budget trade program.
Who makes the decisions of whether these apply? Who makes, you said potentially, who makes the decisions of?
It depends upon who the final user of the power will be, and that has not been determined yet, so. That's why I stated that, that's why I stated that until that's determined, those rules may or may not apply. However, and for condition 4.1.19, it does state that those are applicable if depending on who the final user of power is. These documents, engineer evaluation and the draft permit are available on our website. Engineer evaluation itself It includes administrative information about the facility, a detailed discussion of the CBI, a description of the proposed facility and the emission units, a detailed discussion of the emission calculations, it quantifies the proposed emissions per pollutant, regulatory applicability of the state and federal air quality rules, the required monitoring, record keeping, reporting, and testing, and also what the statutory authority of the Division of Air Quality would be. The draft permit is separated into different sections. There's facility requirements, and then there's also specific unit requirements. The specific unit requirements contain the limitations and standards about the units in question, such as the maximum design heat input, the operating requirements, fuel specifications, and the control device requirements. It outlines what the monitoring requirements of the facility would be, the performance testing requirements, as part of the permit, the regulatory requirements, and the reporting requirements. So as far as what the next steps are, in the permit process, the next thing is that we will hold a virtual public meeting on July 17th, 2025, to accept oral comments only. There's a link on our website on how to sign up for this virtual public meeting. It was also sent out to everyone who commented on this application prior to the public notice. And you can also, on your way out, if you would like, you can sign up with Nicole, who was in the lobby too. As Terry stated, the comment period is set in at 5 p.m. on July 18th. Prior to any final determination that we made on this permitting action, the Division of Air Quality will evaluate and respond to all timely comments that were received that were relevant to air quality issues. The final determination is pursuant to 4513-7. When a final determination is made, it will be made available on the Division of Air Quality website. So to summarize, what we're talking about here is that fundamentally proposing to build a combined terminal facility that is located in Tucker County. The DOQ has made a preliminary determination that the proposed project is properly defined as a minor source and meets all applicable state and federal rules. The engineering evaluation fact sheet and draft permit has been made available to the public since the date of legal advertisement, which is June 18th, 2025. We will accept comments until July 18th, 5 o'clock, 2025. We will evaluate and respond to all timely comments that are received, and then at the conclusion of that, make a final determination. For those that are interested in submitting written comments, the preferred method is through email. For my attention, my email address is on the screen, jerry.williams@wv.gov. It would be helpful if in the subject line, you write fundamental data comments, but here we don't, I mean, we'll get them, but that's just the easier way to find them. And then, if you would rather prefer to send them in through mail, that is our mailing address. And then that link at the bottom of the slide is the web link to where all new source review permit applications that have submitted to DEP that are active are located.
How much weight do the comments hold in your decision?
We look at reading and answer every one of them.
But.
What have you weighed on?
What do you mean, please? Like, doesn't make any difference.
Everyone is the same.
How will it affect your decision?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
We look at determine whether or not the air quality rules are being.
So in other words, our comments really have an effect.
Approved.
How,
Good comments to state that something's not being met, you know, obviously we're gonna investigate that.
how do these comments come into play? Because you're,
I think the best way to do this, so there's. Here is the list of people in order to ask a question. Does that sound good? All right, thank you.
I think just to
It's not working.
touch on.
Okay, I think to kind of address your question, we have to look at the substance of each comment, and it's not so much that we may get 500 comments that bring up issues that we don't have any jurisdiction over. So therefore, those comments probably aren't gonna carry a whole lot of weight. We may get one comment, right, that may bring up a number of issues that we do have authority over, or maybe they point out technical information or something we may miss, or what have you. And that would carry more weight than say 500 comments that don't have, don't relate to the issues that we have jurisdiction over. So it really is a kind of a case-by-case basis for each comment that we receive. We're gonna look at all of them, we're going to review them. I'll give you a quick example. A year or two ago, we had a, application for a water fumigation facility in Carter County. We had a public meeting, very well attended. There was a lot of, local concern about that facility. And through that public meeting process, it was determined that the applicant may not have had proper, right to the actual site where they wanted to do that, proposed facility. And that ended up, the applicant ended up pulling their application, during that process. So,
Pre-HB 2014.
I'm sorry,
Pre-HB 2014.
I don't believe that issue had anything to do with House Bill 2014. It was, we require that the applicant has a legal right to the property they wish to,
These changes
occupy.
I heard what you answered.
Right, but, okay, so again, just the broader point being that, we will look at all these comments and the issues that we have jurisdiction over is, per that being, we find that there's an issue or something like that, then we'll take that into consideration.
We're in a public meeting.
The acreage, the question was the acreage, are you talking about the log fumigation facility, or talking about the fundamental acreage?
Plant facility. Is that part of what they have to do?
Was that?
I mean, they do.
They have provided, I think, Jerry, a plot plan, right, that shows the general location and size and facility inside of the hall. But not specific.
The acreage.
There is an acre value that is part of the application, if that's the question, yes. That is not something that is required that the Division of Air Quality asks for in an application, and has no bearing on whether or not it would meet any of the rules. However, it was provided as part of the permit application.
Yeah, I see your hand raised. Yeah, we're gonna get through the folks that signed up, and then, we're trying to get to everybody. So the first, we're gonna offer the airport names for folks to come up to the podium here. We have Francis Slider, followed by Patty Snow, and Sheena Frosting. So if you guys wanna come up and line up.
Oh, yeah. Okay, are you ready? Yeah. I have several questions, but you all found out that with water, things like that, you all actually on your jurisdiction, right? Aquifer, depletion, so I'm going to ask this question. The impact on our class one area, Dolly Sods Wilderness and Otter Creek Wilderness will not be taken into consideration because this is considered the final story. Still, that's correct or not?
That's correct.
That's correct. The class one area, the official class one area impacts analysis is part of the major source application process, not the minor.
Okay. So it's moved our air quality, facilities and Forest Service have that's collecting this data that you spoke of, that's really moved, right?
I wouldn't say that's good. I mean, that's giving a snapshot of that particular pollutant concentration in the county. So in as much as, you know, that is part of the data point of the air quality in the county, I mean, that's still important data.
But we're already considering the change, right? And, one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Now, there's going to be no, there's, no grid connection. That's not, correct. I talked to Mr. Chapman. And he's told me a couple times there's no grid connection there between the power plant and the grid.
So as we sit here tonight, like I
Pardon
said,
me?
Yeah, I'm guys. I'm trying.
as for your question about the grid connection, as I stated in my presentation, I said there has been no definitive end user, in power user, as I stated. So it's been, so as far as making a determination on the acid rain permit or Title V permit, because it has not, because fundamental has not made a definitive decision on who the end user power is, it can't answer that question this time.
Well, I mean, Casey Chapman has told me, on two different occasions, there's no grid connection. And there's no, transmission lines in there. There's transmission lines 10 miles away. So, I mean, we all know where this power is going, regardless, you guys will recognize that or not. Yes, but that,
Give him the mic, Frank.
right?
If you had a conversation with Casey Chapman that said that, I didn't, so.
No, I'm just saying, you know, you know where that power is,
Okay.
right? You know what you call fundamental data? Let's go floor stuff.
There is nothing in the permit application about a data.
Okay, but you know.
Read the Wall Street Journal. The all, yeah.
Hi, thank you. My question is concerning hazardous air pollutants and cancer risk assessments. I know generally that HAP and cancer risk assessments is not always required for a minor source. But it can be required if emissions are above certain levels and if they're located near sensitive populations or areas. This permit seems to fail to adequately address cancer risks and hazardous air pollutants or HAPs, particularly formaldehyde, and I believe it's pronounced acetaldehyde emissions. So my apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. The facility is supposed to emit 3.86 tons a year of formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen. Plus the one I mentioned earlier, plus benzene, plus other toxic compounds. Yet no comprehensive health risk assessment or cancer risk modeling was conducted. So I guess basically my question is, how can the West Virginia DEP approve a facility emitting multiple carcinogens without analyzing cumulative cancer risks to nearby residents, especially the 200+ children that are at Davis Thomas Elementary School?
Yeah.
So basically, half are interested in discussion. So I just want, first of all, point out that for hazardous air pollution, it was the EPA has defined a major source of hazardous air pollution as an aggregate of 25 tons a year of HAPs, or any single HAP over 10 tons a year. So it sounds like a tremendous lot, by almost 10 tons of hazardous air pollution. But HAPs are not, again, don't have a national air quality standard, don't have a series of metrics to compare potential impacts to. So we're not even needing, it sounds like a lot, but this is not a large source of HAPs relative to many sources in West Virginia. The thresholds that we have at 10 and 25, this source doesn't meet. So it doesn't trigger any other analysis like you're talking about. We just don't have the metrics to do that. This particular level of HAPs, it's just not there. And it's just the way the minor source, it sounds like a lot, but relatively speaking. Just with formaldehyde, there's certain background concentrations as well, natural occurring HAP. Sounds like a tremendous lot, but relative to many other sources. It's not a huge source of HAPs, it's just.
Like what other source?
So just so I'm clear, I'm sorry, the mic's out, so I hope you guys can hear me. Just so I'm clear, are we not going to see any type of hazardous air pollutant or cancer risk assessment for this project?
Being under this review now.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Shayna Grossman, followed by Lenore Howard and Michael Goss.
Thank you. Skip me.
What was your name again? Patty Snow. Okay, sorry, Patty Snow. And then Shayna Grossman. Shayna Grossman. And next we have Lenore Howe after Ms. Snow here, and then Michael Goss.
So I would like an answer on this, in terms of the center relationship. Has the WDEP considered that this facility is likely linked to high energy data center or centers? Despite the application not saying so. And if so, how can the emissions be realistically projected without knowing the end user and energy demand?
So when a permit application comes in, we review it for the emission units that are part of the process. And that's what we've done here. We've looked at the combustion turbines, storage tanks, diesel unloader. And from those emission calculations, made a determination that it was a minor source. If any source in West Virginia, or in the United States for that matter, whether it be fundamental or someone else, decides to come in and make a modification to the equipment that's already there, or chooses to add additional equipment to a facility, then a permit modification is required. Those permit modification regulations are part of the existing draft permit. This is section 2 of that draft permit on how you would apply for permit modification if that were to be required. So if fundamental were to add any type of emission unit at the facility, that part of the property would go under same review. So if they were to add, components that were consistent of the data center, then we would look at the air emissions associated with that and make a source determination on whether or not the emissions exceeded a certain threshold. As I stated as part of my presentation, if it's determined, or the synthetic minor limitations that are established now cannot be relaxed without going through a retroactive PST process. So there are procedures in place to address the question that you asked.
All right, next we have Lenore Howe, followed by Michael Goss, and then Catherine Fleischman. And I apologize for any mispronunciations of names.
So far, you're fine.
I'm sorry.
So far, you're doing fine.
So this is one permit for air quality. Is that the only permit that fundamental data is going to need to get in order to build this plant? There are other EEP that will be following the air quality.
From an air quality perspective, you know, that's what we do, and that's what we're here to discuss tonight. From an air quality perspective, if there are no changes to the facility, like if it's not determined it's an acid rain, if it doesn't need an acid rain permit or Title 5 permit, then for now, the only air permit that would be required would be this. However, if it's determined that they do need an acid rain permit, they would then have to apply for that 24 months prior to the beginning of operation, and also a Title 5 permit. As far as permits from other, DP organizations, whether it be water or waste, I'm unable to speak to that because, but I'll paint it with there.
So, yeah, thank you. So it's possible that there could be, a stormwater construction permit, it's probably very likely. If you disturb more than an acre, you have to get, you have to be registered under the state's, stormwater construction general permit, which, determines how sites manage, stormwater runoff during the construction phase of their, proposed project. If they're going to discharge, any kind of water to waters of the state, they may need an NPDES permit, which is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. And again, that just will depend on their operations and what they propose to do. We have to wait until they submit an application, before we can say yes, they'll leave one, or no, they won't. So on how they plan to operate. You know, it just, again, other permits may be needed from other, state agencies. We can't really speak to what possible permits may be out there. So it just kind of depends. You just have to maybe reach out to maybe the Public Service Commission or some of those other agencies to determine what may be needed, what may not be needed. Okay, yes, ma'am. Right, we had a Lenore Howe, next we have a Michael Goss and a Catherine Schleichen.
I have a couple questions on what you stated before. If they're applying for a minor application right now, is there time they're going to change that to a major application?
Yeah, so, right, so as I was going through, you know, presentation and just now, so the way that the drug permit's written right now, it's written as a minor permit. So essentially, it's synthetic minor permit because they're taking physical and operational limitations to stay below the major source threshold. If they were to add, equipment, make modification facility, if they added, you know, equipment that would push down above that major source value, then yes, there would be additional permitting would be required.
What's the time frame on it? That's the question.
The timeframe, a permit, like if they were gonna add something that would put them over, they would have to have a permit in place before they could install the equipment.
They're waiting to the user of they're getting their part prepared just to create power that's not running into a grid. When does the user have to present or who's going to use that power?
So, and once that end user is defined and made a determination, if that acid rain permit is required, the acid rain permit still has to be submitted 24 months prior to the unit going into operation.
I think it built it and then.
So, again, the last question here, since you're going to be using diesel, we have 1,500 trucks coming here, the fuel is 15 million gallon tank. That fall in there, volume too.
Mobile sources, no.
That's okay.
Great question. And I am on the list. So I wonder if permit would be bumped up from minor to major, the more accurate emissions calculation included the emissions that would be needed to burn off the diesel that will periodically need to be burned off because of low shelf life of diesel fuel.
But right now, the calculations do not include the idea that diesel will ever need to be used. But in fact, it has a low shelf life and it will need to be burned off. I don't know, not a scientist, but I know that it will need to be burned off more often than is included in these emission calculations.
So the emission limits that are part of the permit. You have, they're based upon, like was talking here earlier, worst case, natural gas per pollution, worst case diesel per pollution. There is a maximum hourly throughput also that's in the permit that cannot be exceeded for natural gas and for diesel. They have to continuously monitor how much diesel is being burned, how much natural gas is being burned. Those values then go into the calculation process to determine whether or not those emission limits that are part of the permit are being met. So if they choose to just burn diesel for the purposes of burning it off, as you say, that goes into it, and that counts against that total value. So that would be accounted for in the total value. If they choose to just burn that off as part of the process, then it is accounted for, yes.
Is that something that you all are including in your calculations, is my question?
The way that, once again, it goes back to, we're looking at it as a worst case scenario, right? So if they, as part of that process, burn that diesel because they have to use it, that counts towards that total value that's in part of the permit. It's not additional, it's inclusive. So it is included, yes.
I'm Catherine Inflation, and I think please. I'm Catherine Inflation, and I think my question, parlays with Charlie's. So on page 46 of the application, there are the three diesel tanks are listed as 10 million gallons each. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's 30 million gallons of diesel fuel. So is that, will that amount, is that allowed for extra space? Is that allowed for the growth of a full source or a major source pollution permit? And will the company be required to complete another permit, or are you considering that as a potential for a larger pollution source?
Sure. Thank you. So you're correct. The tanks are 10 million gallons. And when you go and you look at the emission calculations, it was based upon, being 10 million gallons, having 10 million gallons of diesel in each of the tanks, what the vapor pressure was, what the temperature was, the meteorological conditions in the application, and what they were to make that determination of what the potential emissions would be. So that is a 30 million gallon potential of diesel. As far as the throughput that would go to those tanks on an annual basis moving forward, it's 15 million gallons. It's a prediction of essentially like half a turnover of liquids per tank. So since it's looking at like 5 million gallons per tank as a turnover per year. So all those emissions are, so the tank emissions, 10 million gallons each of 3 tanks, those account for all the emissions. Then when you look at the loading, the 15,000 gallon, 15 billion gallons, that would be part of the loading process, those emissions are accounted for there. But there would be that initial, if that's the question, there would be that initial field, but the process moving forward is just 15 million gallons per year estimated. You're right.
I'm not sure that if I were
They have, the plan is for diesel fuel as a backup source only. It goes back to like looking at using diesel fuel, how much diesel fuel it takes to protect to stay below that line of construction.
That $2 billion in budget, the burden that they have to do is the diesel deteriorate.
The 15 million is the amount of diesel that could be unloaded from the trucks at the facility. The amount of diesel that could be combusted on a maximum hourly basis is in the permit in section 4.1. These are separate, they're separate items. There's an unloading item, and there's a combustion for the turbine item, and then there's a tank value as well. So there are 3 separate items.
All right, next, we have Anna Tierney, followed by Brent Easton, and then Sean Tierney.
I know you had some trouble with the mic. Is everybody able to hear me? Tucker County is my home and I love living here. And after watching my dad die for, of course, for about 4 years in COPD, I'm pretty passionate about the air emissions, and the concerns that come with them for our children, our elderly community. Independent analysis shows that the requested 28.5% capacity factor for the diesel fuel. The facility would exceed the synthetic minor limits, and at a 70% capacity factor, diesel operations would be limited to approximately 24 hours annually. This creates an impossible operational decision in the event of a natural gas failure. Either exceed permitted emissions levels, triggering that prevention of significant degradation review, or shut down the facility. How will the DEP track compliance with these permitted pollution levels? And would this be data be made available to the public? How can the DEP approve a synthetic minor classification for a facility that mathematically cannot operate as designed within its emission limits? When this power plant is not in compliance with Mount Storm, Kingsford plants, all plants in general aren't, they get fined. Will our residents be notified? What would be the time frame? And will we funnel those funds directly to Thomas Davis Elementary School?
There were a lot of questions there on the start, trying to remember what order they were. So the first question dealt with, you were quoting percentages of operation times and things of that nature. So when the way that they have to continuously monitor the turbine hour in operation and how and what fuel they're combusting, right? So if when making a statement that like, well, they could only operate this percentage if they use this fuel, or that much percentage if they use, it's the permit does not say you have to burn exclusively one fuel or the other. So making a correlation with a percentage between the two, it's not possible, right? Because essentially the goal is to burn natural gas exclusively, right? So if they burn natural gas exclusively at the 61,320 hours, which would keep them below the maintenance threshold, then yes, you're correct. They would not be able to burn any diesel at all. Because if they did, they would be in violation of the permit.
But
And then
doesn't
the
that
flip-
come back to the shelf life question that Charlie was asking earlier?
And then what happens if they violate the permit?
I'm trying to take these questions one at a time, please, all right? So then if they said, okay, well, they burn, 50,000 hours, then that would allow for time to burn diesel, right? So the stating that, like, well, it only can operate at a certain percentage, like, there's limits in the permit of what they can or can't see, and the determination is based upon the fuel that has to be monitored continuously to meet those values. So the permit requires that the permittee to continuously monitor fuel use.
Who does monitor?
The permittee, fundamental.
Did you check that?
Check your
We
work.
have a compliance enforcement section.
Hey, put on it.
No, I understand, we all.
So we do have folks here from our inspection and compliance division, but, we get this question a lot, on different permits across different divisions, across the agency. And when we talk to folks about, self-reporting and self-monitoring, naturally, we get kind of the reaction that we just got here. As you all know, the DEP, like any other kind of regulatory agency, or public safety, group, we can't be everywhere all the time. So there is self-reporting that's done not only in West Virginia, but across the country. And it is essentially the backbone of the compliance and enforcement model, that not only the air quality regulations, use, but water regulations, oil, gas, things like that. They all use some sort of self-reporting model, because again, we can't be everywhere all the time. Sorry.
I don't think they're generating picture like that, like, it's a little different kind of machine.
How does that affect your, or how does that interact with House Bill 2014? The fact that we have no control, we're not out of the
Yeah, again, we understand that folks have a lot of different, opposition to House Bill 2014, but that bill does not affect our regulations. It doesn't affect our permitting. It doesn't affect our compliance enforcement. These facilities are required to maintain records that they have on site, and our inspectors will come do checks of those records to ensure compliance. And typically, when we say self-reporting, it's not so much that, the permittee is sending, Joe Smith from, janitorial staff to go and do his monitoring. It's typically done through a third party, or some kind of, compliance monitoring, company that specializes in this kind of work. So there is somewhat of a separation.
They have to become compliant if an inspector finds them non-compliant with regulations.
I think one of my original questions, actually, if I could just ask it again, I know that people are getting a little excited. One of which was, when the power plant is not compliant, which we know will happen because they're right at the threshold. Will the residents be notified? What would the time frame of notification be? And will those funds that are assigned to them directly go to our county, our town, and the people that are directly affected?
So if they are found to be, in violation of their permit, our compliance and enforcement group will, issue a notice of violation. We put those, reports on our website, on our online database, where folks can routinely check there to ensure compliance, or just see whatever documents are relevant to that facility. There's not.
So it's left to the consumer to discover if we're being exposed to more emissions.
Yes.
Yes.
How soon will we do it?
All right, next we have Brent Houston, followed by Sean Tierney.
Good evening. My question is in regard to, numerous redactions that are contained in the application. For example, you have individual turbine information, you have, control device manufacturer, these two things I saw. But that's obviously not by any means the end of what's been redacted. My question is pretty simple. Is any of the redacted information subject to a patent?
Subject to a patent.
I heard, yeah, I mean, the information that's confidential is confidential.
Well, I mean, here's why I give it. Okay, so you give, I don't know.
Get the mic.
Under, I'm looking at title 45, legislative rules series 31, which talks about the confidential information and when it defines trade secrets, which is specifically what they do. In the application said are trade secrets, specifically excludes things that are patented. If something's patented, it already has a protection built in, so they don't need it as a secret. So it shouldn't be redacted, it shouldn't be subject, so if DEP's not looking at that and determining whether some of the things in there are protected by patent, then not doing your job fully. There may be items that are being called confidential business information or trade secrets, which really aren't. The reason I brought up the two specific ones that I did, the individual turbine info and the control device manufacturers, because I'm almost certain fundamental that is not in that business. They don't build turbines, they're not building control devices for the turbines. They're buying turbines from someone. Those people might have an interest in protecting what they're building, but they're not the ones applying for the air pollution permit. So my concern is that my concern is that there's things that are being included as confidential business information or trade secrets, which one, aren't the intellectual property of fundamental data, two, may be subject to a patent, which would disqualify them from falling in that category. Do we know the answer though?
So, you know, Tara said, I mean, can't comment on what's been redacted specifically. But, and definitely go back and look at that, just, I mean, and, that didn't jump out to me, the patent, that started with 31. But, you know, what has ultimately been claimed confidential? I think I can answer not fully, but I think I can answer pretty confidently that would not fall under the patent designation that you're talking. That's what I can give you sitting here right now without thinking through that and looking back at 31. So my thought is, take a look at that closure of that language. Like what's been, that I'm aware of, are things like certain configurations and sizes and things that are not, that I don't think are data that is truly patentable, or, you know what I mean? I don't think they're not. So my thought right now is they will definitely look back at that, and in response to comments, address that forward. Give you an answer now, I don't think there's anything in there that would fall under that qualification, sitting here today.
Thank you.
Well, next we have, Sean Tierney, followed by Amy Birdsong and Tammy Siler.
Good evening, thank you all for being here. Not easy being in the hot seat of this meeting, but I had a couple questions around the air quality data and the modeling waiver. So there's three questions, but I'll just read through and give you the context in mind. Why do both the permit application and draft permit show to be determined for all stack specifications when this information is essential for air quality modeling? Why does DEP justify waiving air quality modeling requirements for a utility scale power plant in a sensitive air stream? Standard practice requires an impact analysis for facilities of this size, but the DEP waived modeling using synthetic binder classification, creating logic that avoids analysis that would reveal impacts that require nature source review. Air models were based on Elkins, Anokaming Valley, Davis, and Thomas. Our air dispersion works differently up here. You can just check the fearless forecast during the winter, and you will see how unique our climate is. Can you redo the model based on data from Anokaming Valley, Davis, and Thomas? Thank you for your time.
So, yeah, so for the meteorological data, when I was doing my presentation earlier,
went in detail about, the meteorological data that was used in estimating storage tanks. Yes, the permit applicant did utilize weather data or meteorological data from Elkins in estimating the storage tank emissions. The DEQ went back, created a weather profile for the Thomas area to recalculate those storage tank emissions, which resulted in lower emissions for the storage tanks located in Thomas. We also took an additional step and ran those same tank calculations using a more sophisticated modeling program, and the emissions from that were even lower than the tanks did. The meteorological data for the turbines did not use the Elkins data. The meteorological data for the turbines utilized elevation, temperature, and pressure data for this area, or for the area where the turbines are located.
What about stats? We asked about stats.
So let me address the modeling a little bit, the area dispersion modeling. So a modeling analysis is a very labor intensive, difficult process. We use the cutoff of the major solution, like most states and most agencies, not all, but most. Our threshold for requiring modeling is what the EPA requires for a major source. So new major sources or a major modification have to go through the dispersion model. We don't require those for minor sources. We don't. Could we or would we for the endless resources? Possibly, but we don't. Except it's a very expensive and long, difficult process, and we have to have a threshold when it's required, and that threshold is the standard one. That's determined by EPA of the major minor source threshold. Now, like I said earlier, too, for most sources, that threshold is 250 tons. So the many sources can have 249.4 tons of NOx, and they're minor source. There is that list of 28 sources, source types, that have the lower 100-ton threshold. And that list is not indicative of more dangerous sources or more sensitive sources. It's indicative of like an artifact from the early PSD rules way back in the 70s. So fundamental data is actually subject to a much stricter major minor source threshold. So I just want to point that out as well. So most sources, many sources, permit much more and also not be required to model. We have to have a threshold, and that threshold is the major minor source applicability threshold. In this case, it's 100 tons. And one other thing I'd like to point out, I don't have a problem speculating, not in the permit, but I would speculate that the most likely use of this power is for a data center. I don't have a problem speculating that. Jerry's 100% right. It's not listed officially. It's not a part of our determination, but certainly we speculate that. And in that case, I could point out that the 99.4 times is the worst case. And almost all permitted the worst case emissions has the potential to emit. The actual emissions are often much less. So, will we be operating at exactly 99.3 times right up to the limits? Almost certainly not. That's the worst case, and that's what we have to do on paper, make the threshold. So, again, any of those questions about modeling, the answer is going to be the same. The cutoff is the major minor source threshold. And that's the reason why, that's the standard EPA threshold, and that's what we use, and that's what we have to use.
Next we have Jane Birdsong, followed by Tammy Seiler and Denise Reese.
Something about satire.
Uh,
I'd like to ask
too, but starting right now, how many inspectors are there in your department for air quality at various things? How many? 20?
Roughly 20, yeah.
Roughly 20 inspectors, and they cover not only natural gas plants, but what else? A whole lots of places. We know that there aren't enough inspectors, just they can't get around even once a year to a lot of the things that need to be inspected, correct?
Yeah, 55 down.
Okay, so main question is how long does the company have to become compliant after an inspector might happen to find them non-compliant? How long do they have to become compliant?
Yeah, I mean, I'm primarily involved in the enforcement section. Charles, and these guys can speak to. In terms of coming into compliance, I mean, we expect it to come into compliance immediately. Now, you know, that may or may not actually relate to this expectation. We will run a notice of violation if it's a serious offense, if it's, you know, if there are what I'm calling imminent harms or dangers, then we will expect immediate compliance. But then, you know, then we will run an NLV, notice of violation. We may have a compliance or consent, you know, that will, dog in fines, maybe additional harm, or additional control, whatever that might be.
And is, someone else asked this, is the community allowed to know of the company becoming non-compliant with their regulations?
We don't have a public notification method or system. Now, as they said previously, our NOVs, our inspection reports, they are on our public system, AX. So, you know, the public, you know, they are welcome to check that
So the,
daily, twice a day, whatever, you know, that may be, they can go on that check.
But that's the information the company provides. Is that, no.
Well, it may include, it's kind of an all of the above thing, but it will also include our write-ups, our fines, our notice of violations, our consent. So it does include all that.
You can tell we're basically concerned with companies not always reporting correct.
and you just post it for 1 day or something.
It's on there,
So they're not, you can, so they're compliant.
no, it's on there forever. And it's not, doesn't come off. Yeah.
Next we have a Tammy Seiler, followed by Denise Brees and Lee Sherline. Do you have any of those names up here? Okay, we'll skip down. Jamie Jacobs. What's your name, sir? Lee Sherline. Lee Sherline. Question. How many applications are air quality applications are filed per year?
Well, I don't have it in front of me, but that's not something I'm buying, but so, first of all, there's many different types. So across all types, general purpose.
Thank you.
Well, I've been yelled at for that time. Not hearing me, but, so for all types, it varies year to year, 300-400.
How many of those are denied?
0, usually. Let me address that, because I love this question. How many would be denied if we had to make our judgment only on what was submitted? I would say 75%. But our job is not to deny the permits based on what comes in. Our job is to give feedback to companies, let them know what's wrong, tell them they may not be meeting this rule, they need to Add a control device here, this calculation is wrong. When you talk about that process, that we work with these companies to get them into compliance, that's why we held them back first. If the rule was, and we have to make a decision based on what's submitted on day one, we wouldn't deny a lot of permits, many permits. So I get that a lot, and it's a little bit, because the process of working with the company, getting it right, getting it in control, getting it in compliance, a lot of times is what allows us to go through A to B without denying a permit. That's why we request that information many times. We need additional information, we need additional calculations, and that is an everyday part of our process. It's built into the rule.
Have you met with fundamental data in person, or is it all just letters?
Have we met with fundamental data in person? Joe and I, we came up here to do the site inspection, met with fundamental data. I've also had multiple phone, virtual meetings, if you will, with them, yes.
Have you been to their office in Virginia?
No, I have not.
They seem like a pretty shady outfit to me. Meanwhile, this minor application is gonna turn into a major situation later. What will it take to shut them down? If you issue a citation to them, you give them X number of weeks or months or years to comply. That doesn't seem good for our environment, does it?
James outlined the process, if there is a violation, about issuing notice of violation, working with the company to not have the violation. If it is an egregious violation, then there is immediate steps, including making them stop operation until they are in.
Well, I don't know about you, but I've heard a whole lot in the news about relaxed environmental protections across the United States. And it just concerns me, especially saying, well, we don't deny any application, we work with the people to bring it up to snuff. What if they just out now provide you nice lady out there? What if they provide you inaccurate data that you're working with?
So, an example here in this situation, right? So like if they got the combustion turbines, they're required to conduct performance testing for NOx, CO, and SO2. When they conduct a performance test, if it's determined that the information is not valid, obviously we have a situation on our hands, yes.
So they submit all that information to you on a monthly basis?
Performance test, the performance test, in order to conduct a performance test, right, it has to be done within a certain amount of time when the turbine begins operation, it's gonna be 12 months, right? They have to submit a detailed test protocol, which has to be approved by our DEP testing coordinator, that all the steps of the test is gonna meet the EPA methods. Once that happens, the testing protocol is approved, then they have to notify us of when the test is gonna be, so that we can have personnel there if we want to observe the test. They conduct the test, and then they have to submit the results of that test to us upon receipt.
How often? Yeah, I thought he said how often?
How often do you monitor?
Is it every month or every
So,
year?
the permit requires continuous data monitoring of the fuel fructose and hours of operation.
But how often do you evaluate? Is what he asked. So how, do you look at it once a year?
How do you define continuous? I guess what the premise of the question. Like, is it daily monitoring, weekly, monthly, quarterly?
I mean, they monitor, but how often is it evaluated to see if it's under regulation, I'm sorry, is
No,
that,
that's
okay, I'm
exact.
sorry.
So your question is how?
It's his question, yeah.
When you-
I'm sorry.
So you're asking, who monitors at the state level? Who monitors their output of emissions? So our compliance enforcement section, who do the inspections and review the reports and things that they're required to do, will be the compliance enforcement. And the inspections, how often do they occur? I'm permitting, we'll have inspection.
For synthetic mine stores like this, we generally get them every 2 years. There's nothing regularly do this that prevents us from inspecting places often. It could be monthly, it could be weekly, it could be 6 months. So if we have reason to suspect something's going on, we can do more.
So do you have a tip line?
Yes, I have no.
We couldn't know.
Absolutely, it's public knowledge. That's our way. If you suspect something's going on, you want to register a citizen complaint, we get 500 or 600 a year, and lots of them. We investigate them. Yeah, and please, they do need to be valid, patients, it's not done. But, yes, if you as citizens register complaints, we will investigate.
But we don't,
And one last question. And I know this doesn't necessarily fall under, air quality network, but what will it take to get a thorough environmental impact statement completed prior to this taking place?
Yeah.
Any kind of digging at all? What will it take? How can we make that happen?
prior to
Again, as air quality, we do not know a form of environmental impact statement. The as a whole, each division looks at what's under their authority. And whether it's permitting or, enforcement. And, they handle what's under there's just no legislative rule or mandate. That's something you go to your legislator and say, I want any power plant to have an EIS. But we don't have the authority to do it.
Well, they're looking to build the highways north of here. There's thorough environmental impact statements that have to be completed before that highway can be constructed.
Yeah, those are required by law. It's not, the DOH, it's not their policy to do some.
So a power plant, it's not required by law to do thorough environmental impact statement.
Not, we don't have the authority to require.
All right, thank you very much. I have a question about, when Jason spoke about, you want to file a complaint. We give you the phone number. File a
I
complaint.
don't know when to. What do I do it every day? I mean, how do I know?
It has to be about filing a complaint. It can't be that.
How do you know the air pollution, the metals or the toxic things in the air are bad for the elementary school?
This is another, it's a great question. It really is. This is a common question. How do we know? And it's this, another answer that, the answer that I always give is, all right, in a perfect world, we have a continuous monitor for every computer on every staff that's connected to a server in the plant that's then connected to our headquarters that we now publish on the web. So you go to www.info.dhu.com and you get to see the real-time, 24-hour a day, 365-day a year emissions from every staff. There is not enough money or resources in the world or even technology to do that for every source of the state. So every regulatory agency pretty much has the same path. When we permit a source, We put in initial performance testing to verify the emission factors that we use, and then set up a continuous compliance mechanism. Often, like in this case, it's based on monitoring parameters, fuel usage, or hours of operation, and other performance indicators on the control devices and so on. And we use that to show continuous compliance. We cannot, and you're right, we don't have a mechanism, the technology, or the money to have a real monitor for every unit on every stack, for every source in the state, because everybody would want it on every facility that's within a mile of their house. Oh, if we did, I wish we did.
So basically, you're trying to run it to this community. Monitor, put a bunch of monitors around.
Not at all.
Why can't you build it like not close to our community?
That's the motion we have a little bit. We have input whatsoever on site selection. With no input on business model or a lot of questions about how does this work, if this doesn't work. We don't evaluate, is this even possible? We evaluate what they're in an application and we put limits to enforce those emissions. We don't have the expertise to evaluate every source, is it a viable economic enterprise or not? Is it realistic or not? Our job, as we said earlier, is to use the rules that we have to evaluate the potential emissions and write a realistic permit that works in the real world to provide compliance with those emissions. You know, that's what we do.
All right, next we have a Jamie Jacobs, followed by Lydia Crawley and Casey King.
And there.
Casey King?
Okay, so a lot of the questions here, into the mic, a lot of the questions here have been very specific about the major versus minor, and I can tell that people are really concerned we're getting a ping and a poke. And I'm not gonna ask you those questions, I'm gonna ask you a couple very general questions. Because we're here in this beautiful place, if you can look out here and you can see that it's a big bowl. And everybody is worried about what is gonna happen in this bowl, because those of us who live here know what happens with the prevailing winds. So I have a couple of questions about what's gonna happen and how long it's gonna go on. So my questions are these. Even though Mr. Kessler mentioned that cumulative impact statement is not part of this process, what is the expected lifespan of this facility? And, or one generally like it? And what can you say about the planned obsolescence of this proposed plant? So if this goes through, how long are we expected to? Number two, can you comment on what might be the observable impacts of air quality to residents right here in the valley? Right, like I don't know if anybody's ever been to Mexico City. Mexico City has a big bowl, pollution sits right in it. Are we gonna sit up here and bulb up and look out and see pollution? Are we gonna smell things? Are we gonna have, elderly people with asthma, people struggling? So what are the observed impacts of air quality to residents? And then third, can you comment on the eventual decommissioning of a facility like this and what it would look like and how any mitigation might come into it?
So again, the first question, how long is this plant gonna last? The permit will not expire. So, again, that's a business decision, maybe it's a question of how long the equipment lasts, whatever it is, I can't answer that. And the third question about decommissioning, it's not really an air quality question as far as I know. Just to let you know, when and if it is decommissioned, the permit becomes inactive. When a source decommissions like that, they take equipment off site. They can't bring it back without having to go through all this again. Now, the second question is much more difficult, and you know, that from experience, having seen many sources, having seen many combined cycle sources, I don't think that there's gonna be any observable where this location is, you know, visual impacts from winds. Yeah, James, you've seen many, from natural gas combustion, diesel backup even, I don't think that you're gonna notice or see any vision. Impacts, again, it sounds like a lot. 100 tons a year of power plant. I mean, a lot of times we think, okay, something's flowing like John Amos. You can see 30 miles away. You know, a plant like John Amos is generating 3,000 megawatts. Has emissions of 4,000 tons. You know, so there's not a real equivalency, although they both are power generation facilities. If that's what's in your mind, that is in no way what's being proposed to. I mean, again, I don't feel like, again, visual impacts don't be necessarily an issue at all. To say that it is. You're talking about inversion layers, and that's not something I can speak to directly of the Met data in this valley. I know even in,
Right, and by noticeable, I think it's yeah, it's a different planet up here. A different planet. Yeah, by noticeable, I don't just mean visual, I mean, like, are we gonna?
I don't think there have any other complaints with this. I don't, I mean, again, we're not getting to the level of, again, the major source level for the more strict, source categories. So, that by a house next to it. I live in Charleston, right next to an institute. I live in the only chemical valley, so I understand, concerns, I really do. But really, based on this source type, the location, I don't think the impacts are gonna be large, and substantive from this facility.
Don't think?
No.
Yes, and there's no indication that this would cause any positive any violation of the National Air Quality Standards, which is the important metric. So that's about what I have to answer on that.
All right, next we have Lydia Crawley.
Caroline, all my questions have already been.
Thank you. Next we have Casey King. And then, after Casey, we have Marilyn Schoenfeld.
I'm Casey King, and I'm a full-time resident here in Tucker County. I'm Casey King, and I'm a full-time resident in Tucker County. Most of my questions have been answered by you all, and I appreciate that. One of my questions is kind of piggybacks what we were just speaking about. I've heard you say that you took the meteorological data from Thomas because you recognize that the original data came from Elkins, which is in kind of a different area than where this plant is proposed. I heard you say it was costly. Would, because of the way that our weather works and because of the inversion layers that occur here in the valley and in Davis, would you be willing to retest that meteorology, and collect that data during an inversion in the valley?
So the meteorological data, I believe that you're speaking about is when I spoke about the storage tanks. When they submitted the application for the storage tanks, or the storage tank part of the application, was where they used the meteorological data from Elkins. That's when I took meteorological data from Thomas that I obtained from National Weather Service to use in that EPA tank program to recalculate those emissions based upon that data. And it's not costly because that program is free on EPA's website.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood. I
So I
thought that
think-
some data collection we said was.
Well, the air quality modeling is a costly enterprise, yes, but this estimating emissions using the tank program is free.
And would you see it, like, would you be able to do another, emissions testing here based on, data that we have in the valley during the inversion?
So the emissions testing that's required for the permit is on the combustion turbines, and they have to test for NOx, SO2, and CO. As far as the weather data that can be used, or the meteorological data that can be used for the tanks, anyone can go in and put any information that they want into that program to recalculate the emissions. And that's on the EPA tanks, it's EPA tanks 5.1. So if you want to alter like Thomas data, you know, to be different than say what the averages are, then that's something that can be done,
That's the question.
All right, thanks, sir.
Next, we have Marilyn Schoenfeld, and then Wesley Ashcraft.
Good evening. I want to thank you for the presentation. I'm here representing the West Virginia Highlands Conservancy and the Friends of 500. And we respectfully disagree with your decision to have this go forward as a minor synthetic permit. We want to know, in what fantasy world would this project be granted synthetic minor status? Cannot function as designed while maintaining synthetic minor status. An analysis of their own document shows the impossibility of maintaining that status. How is it convenient if all of their emission standards are just below what is needed to qualify for a major source permit? So we would like to know, would it be possible to reject this permit and ask them to redo it as a major source permit, which would involve an EIS and ESD approval? Thank you.
Yeah, so the emission calculations that were performed were based upon worst case scenario, natural gas, to remain a minor source. Worst case scenario, diesel, to remain a minor source. So that would be assuming that it would operate 61,000 hours a year, or the turbine hours per year, and no diesel, or 25,000 hours of diesel and no natural gas. So that's not what's happening. So it's essentially a combination of both. So that's the reason the permit was written the way that it was, where you would track the operation type, the outcome operation of each operation type, have a continuous monitor for hours of operation, for fuel metering. So that way, if those values can be assessed to show that the minor source values are being met.
I have a question that builds on that. The question I have is, those calculations, were they actually based on the capacity of what they're putting in, or was it based on what they said, oh, we won't operate more than this many hours?
It's based upon manufacturer data from the combustion turbine manufacturer.
So it is capacity.
The hourly values, so the permit contains two different values. It contains,
No, I'm talking about the yearly thing. Is it
I
operating, is it
right.
based on capacity, full capacity?
right, so it's two different things. There's an hourly value that's based upon the maximum fuel throughput to the turbine. There's a natural gas emission limit on an hourly basis when they're combusting natural gas. There's a hourly limit for diesel when they're combusting diesel. The annual value that we speak of is not a capacity value. It is a synthetic minor value to remain below the major source threshold. So that's when you take into account the maximum hourly capacity to speak of, right? How many hours that is run and what mode of operation for you. To meet the annual value, which is less than what I've done for you. So the hourly is based upon capacity with the control devices for NOx and CO. And then the annual is the synthetic matter value.
Then can you explain why the, operating hour limits were removed without explanation from the draft permit? Despite having been specifically proposed in the application?
The maximum values that were included in the application were not specifically proposed. Those, once again, goes back to what is the maximum hours using natural gas only to stay below the mega source threshold, and it's 61,320. What are the maximum hours that you can operate diesel and stay below that is 25,000. The reason why so if there was a limit in there that says, well, you can have 61,000 hours, operating hours for the turbine, and it doesn't say in what fuel mode, how could you determine compliance with that? Or if you had 25,000 hours and it didn't specify what fuel mode, how could you determine compliance? When we write permits, they have to have fairly enforceable requirements. So we have to state, how are you going to show compliance with these values? So having an operating hourly value in there, when it's not set in stone that you're gonna operate 61,000 hours or 25,000 hours, it's gonna be somewhere in between those two numbers because you're gonna use both fuels, that's not a fairly enforceable requirement. There's no way to show compliance with it. We have to be able to show compliance with the emission limits that are established in the permit. That's why those weren't in there. Thank you, sir. So it's not a limitation in the permit because it would not be fairly enforceable that, because if you had 61,000 hours of natural gas and 25,000 hours of diesel, there, yeah, then yes, you would exceed that value. So the way that we wrote the permit, so the requirement is fairly enforceable, it does require the fuel metering and the hours of operation. And so, yeah, so essentially, if you just operate a consumer natural gas, look out, that's success for you. Yeah, every year, we're 130 years, right? 4 hours, and 3 years of those solutions. Offset and not going to be 60,000 very hard gas versus 25,000 hours of diesel, right? Compliance with the annual emission limit. So we'll just take it off because it's a high one. Compliance with that is on a 12-month rolling code. So every 12 months, right? So they go January to December. Then you go February, sorry, you go January. Okay, my battery's down, you know. Speak up. Okay, is it better? All right, do that. Okay, so the 12-month rolling total. So you go January to December, and then we go, you know, February, January, March to February. But those hourly values that you speak of, those values were included for illustrative purposes to show that if combusting natural gas only, that the 61,000 hours would keep you below that mega source level, or 25,000 hours only of diesel and no natural gas. So, that's per, so that's turbine operating hours, not. That's a big example. So, right, so each turbine operating hour. Right, so because there's only 8,760 hours a year, right? So if it's 61,000, that's 61,000 turbine operating hours. So we have multiple turbines, each hour or each turbine operation counts towards that 61,000 tons you're talking about. But if it's that, you would still pay 1,555 days If there was only one turbine, then there would be completely different limits, completely different permit requirements, because then that would, if you only have one turbine, you can't have more than 8,000, 760 hours a year.
I'm on the list and I wanted to make it say art.
The microphone.
Tired. And we don't like this thing, and it's gonna take more than bureaucrats, and we appreciate your work. And we know your limitations, and we need people power, and we have a whole lot of these signs out in the hallway. And anybody wants them, they're free.
Now then.
All right, next we have a Richard Brubach, followed by Travis Harmon.
Sounds great.
Richard Brubach, and Travis Harmon. Richard Brubach, Travis Harmon. Next we have a Cat Von Gerstoff. Gersdorf.
Hopefully these will be simple yes or no questions.
Oh,
Can you hear me now? Okay. Will any long-term health studies be conducted to monitor the local impacts of the air pollution, especially because it's in such a sensitive area like our elementary, middle school, Portland Red Acres?
That's not part of the Rule 13 permitting process, no.
Do you know of any studies that are being conducted of any other power plants here in our state of any local impacts on the air pollution?
Yeah, so again, we use the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, being in compliance with those as an indicator of the public air quality and the public health there too in an area. So when an area is in compliance with those National Ambient Air Quality Standards, you know, we accept that that area has acceptable air quality. So, and there is no indication that this facility would change that classification in this county. Yeah, we don't have, you know, people often ask that too, where are these studies, these cancer studies in the staff, and, you know, we don't have a staff of doctors on staff and studies. We do rely on the expertise of the EPA, that they come out with very specific source type rules, certain hats, source categories, and we apply those when they come out, we take delegation off of those, we inspect to make sure we're in compliance with those, but we don't have any independent studies going on, and there's no, and there's no procedure for setting those up, as far as I know, at least within, for a minor source like this. The answer is essentially no.
Would you send your child to that school?
Absolutely, I don't know anything about their academics, but, I didn't know, I mean, is there how close to the business? I was just.
5 miles.
How close?
5 miles.
Alright, so. Again, that is not unique to the state. There are many districts throughout the state that are close to proximity, certainly the city of Charleston, again. So that's not unique.
Monitoring on how that affects any child.
Yeah, those, are absolutely monitored at all.
Well, next we have a Brett Maynard. Brett Maynard. Okay, Amy, Margulies.
I just you all for being here, for answering our questions, we really appreciate it. So my name is Amy, my training is in public health, I'm engaged in public health from Johns Hopkins. But I'm really here as a mom and a community member, I have a 5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old.
And I'm also a soccer coach, and I coach the under 6 Cardinals that practice, less than a mile from the proposed facility. So I have a personal interest in this, but I also care about the community that I live in. And I think, along with a lot of my friends and neighbors, were concerned. Because this doesn't seem like a routine request, and I understand your job is to follow regulations, right? So this is just another facility, another air quality permit, but to us, it's really personal, it's our lives, it's our community. And also, there are some aspects of it that seem a little uncommon. It's uncommonly redacted. I don't see a lot of redactions to this extent on other air quality permits on your website. Mount Storm, for example, has no redactions on their permit. The size of this facility is rather large. You used John Amos and said it's nowhere near John Amos. That's true, but we have a facility of a very similar operating capacity within the site, which is Mount Storm, which is also about 1,600 megawatts, similar size to the proposed facility. So just imagining the facility at the operating capacity of Mount Storm next to the soccer field and the school is a little hard to imagine. It's a little shocking. And I would like to imagine it, but it's hard to imagine because we don't know how tall the stacks are. And I'm not really sure why that would be redacted information. And even within the engineer's evaluation that was produced by DEP, it said this facility will not be visible from the town of Davis. So how do we know if it's not visible or if we don't know how tall the stacks are? So I guess that's a little confusing to me. And so there are a lot of little things in the permit like that that are confusing. And I think we can get into kind of metrics and the indicators and the levels of NOx in our written comments, because I think they get a little boring. But we will be submitting those. I think the location's unusual, and I also think the end source of the power is unusual. We're not really talking about that here, but it is unusual that a power plant this size is not connected to the grid. It's a little weird. We see in Doddridge County, there's the Shea facility, and that facility will be connected to the grid. It has not been met with much community opposition, and that's because they were very transparent in the way they presented the facility. And they were very clear about what that was to be used for, and that the power was going to also go to the community. And what the end use was going to be. And in addition, that facility would not be under HB 2014, so the county would get much more money, many, many times the amount of money that our county would get. And all the money would go to municipal services, which we are not going to receive. If this facility, as we said, we don't know, but we propose, we think maybe it would. So a lot of that money would not go to municipal services. So all those things are concerning to me. And the other thing that I was thinking about was, okay, so how big is this facility? It's very hard to visualize. So it's 1,600 megawatts. It would be the 4th largest facility in the state of West Virginia. It would be the 27th largest in the United States of America. And of all of those facilities within the top 26, they are all major source emitters. It made me a little concerned because I don't want to be the guinea pig and I don't want kids to be the guinea pig to find out what that's like. And I guess the other question I have too is, I started looking around and I thought, it seems really close to the community, like that's a little weird too. Is this a common thing? Is this unusual or is this normal? Like everyone's saying this is normal. So I looked, and of all the 26 facilities of over 1,500 megawatts in the United States, none are located within 2 miles of any town. That I missed was what percentage of these facilities are located within 2 miles of a town, and it said 0%. 0%, that's a metric we can all write down on our paper next to all these other numbers that you're giving us. So I think that's an important one because it is of my concern.
and as a public health expert, and also as a mom. And so all these things saying, well, we don't need to do this by the law, we don't need to do this by the law. I think the other question is, why are we doing, why the synthetic line, right? So it seems to me that the strategy for the synthetic minor is to consistently tweak the way you're operating your facility to maintain yourself below federal regulations.
That's right.
Right? That's how, right? Yes.
To be below
Below
PSD
EPA
threshold,
No, just say it in regular language.
be below the PSD threshold.
Okay, right, so, but that's what they're doing, right? Because you're not saying, oh, if we added this emissions, you're not assessing the permit like that. We're trying to understand as a community, from the person who's applying for the permit, they are saying, look, we are gonna consistently maintain this below the major source threshold by maintaining a synthetic minor source. The synthetic part refers to the fact that it's synthetically remaining below the major source, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, correct. So, my concern is, why do we have regulations? I study public health, why do we have regulations? You tell me you're the regulator.
So if the source was above,
No, just tell me why we have regulations, sir.
the regulations, as Joe alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, is to, you know, you have the National Highway Air Quality Standards. And then those were, you know, based on science, based
The
on.
reason is to protect the public. Because the purpose of regulation is to protect the public. And my role as a public health expert and advocate and mom is to protect my public. Okay, and if you guys don't look after us, then we will look after ourselves. But the other thing is that when you look back like 1968, what happened in 1968? What important regulation was put into place? Seatbelts. Right? Nobody likes seatbelts, they're annoying, right? Seatbelts are annoying, if you're like, or whatever. How many lives have been saved because of seatbelts? About 500,000 lives in the US since that time, and millions of lives, millions and millions of lives abroad. Yes, they are annoying, but they save people's lives. And that's why we have regulations. And that's why we should be tweaking our facilities to keep ourselves below thresholds that were created to protect our communities. To serve our communities, to serve the public health, and not only to serve economic interests. Thank you.
You have Howard Thompson? Is Mayor Thompson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jerry, for being here. It's a difficult position to be in. I understand it, but I really appreciate that you're here.
I think we all appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. So
Do it again.
I've been part of the bureaucracy for 40 years in the military, so I understand your position. But I also am the mayor of campus, just like you all. I have a mission to protect the health and welfare and safety of the population of the community of Davis, and that concerns me greatly. So when we talk about the chemicals, we talk about CFRs, we talk about the regulations and all those kinds of things. Those are bureaucratic requirements. I want to talk a little bit more about this from a human perspective, because that's what I'm concerned. I'm concerned with people as opposed to the regulations. The permit application, if you add up all of the hazardous chemicals, it adds up to over 400 tons per year. That doesn't sound like a lot until you put it in pounds. That's 800,000 pounds of hazardous material that's put into the air every year.
And these pollutants are associated with a range of health outcomes, including exacerbated asthma, bronchitis, lung inflammation, liver damage, cardiovascular disease, increased cancer risk, fine particle matters, especially from diesel exhaust, which have been linked to heart attacks, strokes, and premature death. Due to the area's specific geographical and meteorological conditions, which we talked about earlier, including the valley topography, seasonal wind patterns, temperature inversions, the emissions of this proposed facility may disproportionately impact low-lying areas like Davis, Thomas, and Canning Valley. What that means from a human perspective is this means more asthma attacks, more emergency room visits, more chronic illnesses, more possibility for premature deaths. Seniors, children, and individuals with pre-existing conditions may be hit the hardest. 1 in 5 of our residents are actually over 65 years of age. And before I get into my question, I will just be forthright and say, I don't trust fundamental data one bit. Follow on what Amy was saying, I think they've manipulated the data to stay within a minor current regulation. And the concern that I have is, from a DEP standpoint, you're not going to require modeling for dispersion of these chemicals. We're not going to be able to analyze the effects of what it has for people that live within 1 or 2 miles of this facility and what damage it potentially would harm those people. Because the regulations, which fundamental data has led us down that path, says it's a minor permit and we don't need to do the modeling. You guys say that you can't afford to do the modeling. But what I say is, what is the cost of a human life in relationship to modeling? In West Virginia, we say that there's other places where people live close to facilities just like this. That doesn't give me a real strong feeling of confidence. My question is there anything at all that can be done to do dispersion modeling so we can see the impact that affects people that are going to live close to this?
We're trying to do it ourselves, but we don't have to advocate for it.
I mean, again, I understand your concern, everything you said. Our cutoff and threshold is that major first threshold in law. It's the same concerns that all resources have. And people, we have to have a cutoff, and it's the EPA designated cutoff, which is actually much stricter, again, for this facility than for most facilities, where it would be it would be 250 tons. And again, just I wanted to circle back real quick on this major minor. If a company came in and said, we have a plant that can generate 10,000 megawatts. We're only going to operate 1 hour a year. So we're a minor source. We issued a permit with a 1 hour limit, and they'd be a minor source. We can't deny a permit because we think they're not operating up to their full capacity. You don't have the authority, they don't have, and they will. We can lose the appeal. Yeah. We don't have the expertise to identify every type source category and business models. So what we can say with this one is, based on the limitation criteria talked about over and over again, through the emission factors, the hours of operation, the fuel types, using the control devices, the emissions we are confident are less than 100 tons. We've talked about the enforcement mechanisms on the other side. Is all this perfect? No, I talked about that. It would be great to have every stack monitored every day of the year. We don't. But there's nothing unusual about this permit as far as a synthetic miner going right up to the limit. Most sources will get as high as they can and set their limits, set their operating hours that Jerry was talking about. We see it all the time, 99.4, 249, 98, because they wanted to have as much flexibility to operate as they can. It's not just that it's some magical, they looked at everything and it magically came out at 99. No, their actual hours and actual capacity factor are most likely going to be a lot less than that. But when they came into the permit, and I can't speak specifically for their thought process, but most companies want to go as high as they can without going over the threshold. That's just the way applicants think. They want to get as much as they can in a permit so they have more flexibility.
Yes, the other concern that I have though is that we run a sewer plant in Davis. The DEP inspects our sewer plant more frequently than it sounds like you're gonna inspect the power. Well, and Joe, what concerns me about that is that from the sewer operation, we can get NOVs, notices of violation, we can get fines, we can get corrective action that we need to take. But at the end, you said one of the ultimate things that you would do is you could shut them down. My question is, given the self-serving spineless governor that we've got, would you actually listen to him when he says you can't shut this down?
Obviously, that's a hypothetical question. So I don't need an answer.
Next, we have a Diana Vera, followed by Paula Stahl.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. So I'm gonna start off with a little demonstration. I too lived in the Chemical Valley, lost relatives and friends to leukemias, cancers, etc. If you give us this permit, you get fundamental data of this permit. Can you guarantee that we're not gonna have to live like this? Can you guarantee that our children and our grandchildren, our elderly, our tourists don't have to live like this? Now, moving on. You all know that West Virginia has a history of non-compliance when it comes to their industries. And lots of people have suffered economically and health-wise. I guess I question the integrity of the West Virginia air quality permitting process. We have a lot of scientists in this community, botanists, lots of educated folk, a lot of people who care about our environment, a lot of activists, a lot of journalists. And we know that there has been a mathematical analysis of this particular permit. It reveals deception, lack of transparency has from the beginning. We even tried to find these people. None of them have ever come to speak to us. Their operational claims, particularly for infrastructure that demands reliable 24/7 power supply, and their emissions claim isn't reliable. I thought, like was said before, that your job was to protect public health and welfare, to protect our environment, but now I keep hearing that you don't have the power to do so, that your permitting process does not require a full environmental impact statement. I don't understand how that can be. So, to wrap up my last two questions, even though I know that your agency doesn't need to worry about the annihilation of our salubrious quality of life, our sacred ecosystems, our sustainable tourism industry, I guess I wondered, did you know that? Did you know that if you give them this permit, it would annihilate who we are here, our culture, our industry, our economics, who we are as people? our humanity? Maybe you never even considered it. That's not your job, though, is it? So, for those who have trouble hearing, these are my last two questions. Are you aiding and abetting a major commercial power plant that uses synthetic minor classification to evade environmental scrutiny? And my final question is this: is your government agency a proponent of or an accomplice to eco-terrorism? Because feeding deceptive data centers destined to destroy our environment is eco-terrorism. You're killing us. If you give them this permit and can't guarantee that nothing's gonna happen, then what good is your agency? It doesn't make sense. We live up here, we breathe the air, we fish in the waters, we swim in the waters. These types of facilities do not belong here. These are my questions. Who are you aligned with? Who are you protecting? Are you aiding and abetting these companies? Because they're trying to shove it down our throat, a whole complex of data centers? You don't know what it is. You don't know what the end result is supposed to be, but yet you have the power to give them the power to kill us. Because that's what I'm hearing. I don't know if you can answer my questions, but eco-terrorism is a serious thing. Maybe you need to think about that a little harder when you look at their permit application. Thank you.
It's gonna be Paula Stahl, then Tim Embry.
Hi, Paula. I want to say something to them. I am so proud of my community tonight. Thank you.
Tim Embry. Thank you. Clara and Rob Ackman. Okay. Shayna Crossman.
I spoke first.
I'm sorry.
We open up to questions.
Well, we still have some folks that signed up. We've got a lot. Josh Neese. Nikki Forrester.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. I have a question about fire safety and emergency response resource adequacy. What fire safety protocols protect public health from catastrophic risks posed by 30 million gallons of diesel fuel storage in this remote mountainous location? The permit only states a diesel file trunk quote may be installed and classifies fire suppression as de minimis, inadequate for the scale of fuel storage. How will Tucker County's emergency services, which serve 6,762 residents, adequately respond to industrial scale emergencies that involve 30 million gallons?
To touch on the statement you made about a power pump, maybe you're part of the process, right? So when the application comes in, different facilities have fire suppression systems, right? And usually what those fire suppression systems consist of are the fire, whether they're fueled by electricity, whether they're fueled by natural gas, diesel, whatever it may be. And so if there was gonna be a fire pump that would be fire that combust natural gas or diesel, right? Then those emissions would account towards the facility total. So that conversation was had, right? So let's not say that we didn't look into that. So that's why if you look at the permit condition 4.1.1, the first thing, it states that the air emission units at the facility are limited to what is in the permit, like in table 1. There's no fire pump that is permitted under this facility, meaning that when that comes about, that they would have to, have a permit modification to add that piece of equipment to the facility.
So
If it
correct
was
me if I'm
combusted,
wrong, but
if
if they
it was
added that
air
infrastructure, it would classify them as a major source.
Not necessarily.
How are they gonna protect our community when 30 millions of gallons inevitably spills or explodes? It's not a question of it.
Well, I mean, that's a hypothetical situation. That's correct, right? It could happen. But we aren't in, I mean, the division of air quality is not in like, we don't regulate, we don't regulate fire departments or anything like that. So you can't answer that question because we don't have the authority to do that. Sure.
Next we have, Bill Murray. My favorite actor.
I don't think it'll very.
I was pretty disappointed. Mike Jones.
Say it again?
Oh, I don't have five, you look bureaucratic.
I'm sorry?
I don't have a question. They've all been answered.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Tyler, Nielsen.
You're right.
So I have a few questions that I've revised as we've gone, just based on the feedback we've received. But I would like to start with a personal statement that explains the relevance of my experience to these questions. I was born in Virginia, grew up actually in the Salt Lake Valley, a high elevation basin, topographically not that different from the Canadian Valley. Yes, our mountains are higher, but the fundamentals of air inversions operate similarly with prevailing winds out of the west, trapping pollutants against the high mountains. I lived a very active outdoor lifestyle. We were not wealthy, but I got hand-me-down skis from my cousins, and we skied as often as we could. We hiked and backpacked and swam and rafted on inner tubes. And we lived for the outdoors. And when I moved back east, almost 20 years ago, I missed that experience, and it took me several years to find Canadian Valley. And when I found it, I recognized it immediately. I knew from the attitude of the people in Canadian Valley that they have that same love for the land, that same love for the environment, and that same drive to spend time outdoors, despite, in many cases, limited resources. So I recognize that about this region as compared to where I grew up. I continued skiing out here. I adopted Canadian Valley as my home for wintertime adventures, and I've done so for many years. It was spring of 2022, I was diagnosed with a sudden and inexplicably severe respiratory illness that almost ended my outdoor recreation pursuits. I lay awake wheezing it at night for many months. I could not carry a backpack. I could not ski uphill. I thought that at 36 years old, I was done being able to do these things. I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, trying to figure out what was going on. Chest x-rays, diagnostic tests, and I heard over and over again, everything is normal. We can't see anything on the tests except you can't breathe properly. I finally got a very persistent allergist who wanted to figure out the problem. They interviewed me regularly about triggers for my respiratory attacks. And after about 6 months of diagnosis, they said, you grew up in an area that had severe wintertime inversions and were exposed to industrial pollutants. Your lungs were permanently damaged. You've been living your entire life with 80% lung capacity. Because of this, when I caught a severe respiratory infection that just about every one of us in this room has had, despite outward signs of being completely healthy, it almost ended my outdoor recreation career. And I've spent 3 years trying to rehab the ability that I had before. Specifically because of NOx and PM 2.5 emissions in a high elevation basin prone to temperature inversions. So the first statement that I would like to make, I would like to challenge the statement that the air pollutant modeling for a synthetic minor source is not applicable. The EPA, and I'm going to have to refer to my notes here because I've been searching. The EPA does maintain a program called CTDM+. It is a refined point source Gaussian air quality model for use in all stability conditions for complex terrain, specifically because complex terrain requires specialized analysis to quantify. Yes, West Virginia DEP can absolutely and should require air pollutant dispersion modeling for minor sources. And this would be particularly appropriate and necessary with the high elevation basin topography we have in the Canadian Valley area. While air dispersion modeling, you're right, is typically required for major sources under PSD regulations, West Virginia DEP retains broad authority under West Virginia Air Pollution Control Act and 45 CSR 13 to require additional analysis for minor synthetic sources when circumstances warranted. The location presents extraordinary circumstances that would justify requiring this modeling. And I can tell you, from having stood on top of those ridge lines and looking down on the clouds where the residents live, that there is significant inversion activity going on here that warrants more than usual review. The facility is at 3,129 feet. As another person mentioned, they're claiming the stack height would be below the trees between the facility and the road. They're effectively claiming they will emit pollutants at ground level, but they put it in the permit as TBD. Okay? 75% of residents live below 3,400 feet elevation, the same zone where those pollutants are being emitted. On the drive up here, I drove past Mount Storm, and in today's atmospheric condition, the flume was exactly horizontal. If you're emitting at 3,200 feet and 75% of residents are living below 3,400 feet, they're breathing exactly what is emitted from that facility. So how West Virginia DEP's mandate, I just want to state it, to protect human health and safety, that's West Virginia Code 22-5-1. Denying permits that interfere with air quality standards, that's 45 CSR 13. Ensure ambient air quality standards are maintained, which, as I mentioned, in a topographically unique area cannot be quantified without dispersion modeling. So my question to you is, how does West Virginia DEP fulfill that mandate without requiring pollutant modeling, dispersion modeling? Thank you.
Well, I'm spoken to the mom, and, you know, but I don't have a whole lot else to say about that, and other than, but I've continually said, what we do is we base the, when we model, on the EPA mandated thresholds of major source. And we're confident, very confident that this is a properly designed and crafted draft permit that will protect the synthetic minor status that is proposed, so. In any reasonable sense based on conventional air permitting anywhere in the United States. Again, not on some level that we all maybe like it to be, that I've spoken to several times. And we reviewed and through this process, according to the rules and regulations that we have, that minor source program is part of our state's implementation plan that has been approved by EPA. That minor source is not required, and you're right. It could be required under the authority of Rule 13. But the cutoff that we have said is the major minor source status. That SIP has our minor source permitting rule, it's reviewed by EPA, it has been approved, and we have followed the rules within that, permitting rule for this process. I don't know how to go any farther beyond that.
So can I just restate what I'm hearing for complete understanding? Would there be any level of topographic significance that would require, that would prompt you, West Virginia DEP, to approach a synthetic minor source differently than the minimum requirement?
That's a speculative question, I don't know that I can answer that. If it's a specific case, I can tell you in the 28 years that I've been involved in every person in West Virginia, I don't remember, I don't have any evidence that we've required one of them for any synthetic mining permit in that 28 years. So.
You should look into whether you should in this case.
Sure, it's a good question.
You should look into whether.
It's a good question, but we have one at this point, you should, we should. And I understand why and where those concerns are coming from. I'm saying we haven't in our current policy and the way we do things, the way most states do things, is that we use that major minor source threshold as the determining factor when we model that is required.
Have the authority to think it through.
Expert assessment. It's minor source, that can still be done.
Well, for one thing, we don't have metrics to compare this assessment. You're talking about this inaccurate assessment. There, you know, point me to the, and I'm trying to be facetious, but point me to the state rule that says, here's the resources for you to hire the doctors, the oncologists, everyone to do these studies, and the metrics that I'm comparing these emissions to. That they don't exist. We don't have a procedure. There's nothing in the law that would set up how we would do this assessment. It's not part of our resource base.
That's why we're requesting, we're formally requesting the air dispersion modeling study that's due for major sources. In this case, because this proposal is 0.5 times below the major threshold, that's well within our margin of error, which is common sense here. You in your opening statement very recently said, and first we said, thank you for your time. You very recently said that there's some art interpreting regulations. Your mission, right? Your mission, as the gentleman stated, is primarily to protect the health of West Virginia. That's what it says, right? And so when you are 0.5% below the major source threshold, you're dealing with literally the textbook example, like Main Valley's in climate policy textbook. When you look up a cross pocket area that gets nurtured. That you're in Charleston, and you don't spend much time here. It is the textbook example. It's here in Peterson, Utah. Those are most common examples.
Just the only one I referenced.
In that extraordinary circumstance,
I think I would recommend that you use your reasoning. Reasoning to say, look, this is the case where we're shutting in the art a little bit. And recognize that to protect the public interest, we need to start, air dispersion modeling.
During, just a direct follow-up to help quantify the statements I made up there. Specifically in the Salt Lake Valley, there have been studies that there is a 14% increase in hospitalizations for asthma attacks during a 3-day temperature inversion, with an additional 3% risk for each additional day the inversion continues. Increased rates of bronchitis and pneumonia, more emergency room visits for respiratory problems, reduced lung function, especially in children, 6 to 8% increase in cardiac arrests during pollution episodes associated with temperature inversions. Emergency room visits for heart problems rise significantly, increased deaths from heart disease during extended inversions. So if and when the pollution from this facility begins to concentrate during a temperature inversion, people will die. Thank you.
Children will.
Yeah.
We got something going.
The point is, you need some updated methods. It's outdated, doesn't even apply to our existence of here.
We're coming up on we're really 30 minutes over, but we're gonna push forward.
Are you willing to consider the one, are you willing to consider it?
Let's consider
If it's funded by others, what if we fund it?
If we find it, are you willing to consider it?
Yes, and no.
First of all, Mr. Workman, I'm sure I won't be making that decision, but I will say again, that will be not the way that most programs work. And that again, it's not, we have to consider all sources and all future synthetic miners and staff resources. But one of the reasons we come out and do these moments is to get a visceral reaction to the concerns. And certainly the concerns, and I know there'll be many comments that follow our written form. So, I mean, evaluate all those comments that come in. We consider all those comments that come in. And we make decisions based on a review of everything. Again, this is just been a preliminary determination, this is part of the process. So everything will continue to be considered. I can say for sure, the major concerns about the mouth are very clear. Like I said, I'm sure that will be followed up in written form. So everything will be considered.
Are you willing to consider having a second in-person meeting? Why? That hasn't been asked yet? Hold on. Can we put this on the next time more?
Absolutely, it's time.
All right, we're just gonna keep pushing forward through the list. We're actually, we're 30 minutes past, the end time that we had set. We're gonna go until 10. So at this point, we've got a Gary Birdie.
Let's try to keep quick next to it. Everybody to go get a chance to ask a question.
Thank you. I want to thank all you trucking homeowners from out of state. Thank you. So we have been, we're very second. I think this crowd is pretty low. I want to say some things about this area. Everybody knows what I'm about to say, and I'm gonna ask you a question. Now, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here, including yourselves. And, I know that's not always the case, but, so first of all, this area is not like any other area in the state of West Virginia or in the east. This is the most western place in the east.
We get people that come here from all over the eastern side of this country, and they do it because this place is not the same as where they came from. Our goal is to maintain that draw, maintain that attraction. It's big business. It's $85 million a year in Tucker County. Now, I've heard our county commissioners talk about how the lumber industry, timber industry left us behind. I've heard about how the coal industry has left us behind. What I haven't heard is how the tourism business has left us behind. And they haven't. But these kind of industrial plants within half a mile of the town limits of Davis and Thomas do not make any sense. As a matter of fact, this whole thing smells rotten. There is something rotten in Denmark, as they say. And it becomes more obvious when you put everything together. You put House Bill 2014, which eviscerates anybody talking about this kind of stuff in front of state agency folks. It eviscerates our ability to look at things and say, hey, this is better. It takes all that away. And what we're here for tonight, I think, is to make this project better, if we can't make it go away. And I don't know how we can do that when we don't know who the players are. You don't know where these people are coming. It could be, it could be somebody from out of country that's building this that doesn't have a daggone iota of commitment to making it run right the rest of the time. And you can't tell me that this is not gonna be hooked up to the grid. They're gonna have all these turbines, they're gonna be running, and they're gonna be, if they have excess energy, where is it going? Going into the grid. This is a commercial power station. Now I worked at Mountaineer. I know that there are air quality issues with power stations, and this thing is gonna be huge. You got 50 million gallons of diesel. How come I don't see what the particular concentration is? A half a mile from Davis, it's gonna be emanating that much. Now, we know that diesel particulates are not good for us, but yet you guys say, oh, we can't do anything about that. I don't know why we have a department of air quality if you can't respond to people as they come here. Now, you have said that, one, you haven't denied a permit, you work with all the industry to get permits through. When they go over on a permit, you just go back and you go back to the PSC or whomever, and you get a change in that. So there's absolutely no control on what goes forward from the point of view of our regulatory agencies, if that's the case. And you told me it is, so I sat here and listened to it. So here we are, we're looking at huge amounts of, 50 million gallons of particulate matter. Wasn't even included in your coverage. Is that an oversight, or is that why? Why don't you consider particulate matter coming out of diesel turbines as an issue? And the startup and the takeout of those things creates even more particulate matter. So I don't know what I'm not an expert on your model, but I do know this. The prevailing wind, 99% of the time, is gonna blow that over Davis, over Canaan Valley, over Dolly Sauce, over Dobbin Slashings, the new TNC lands. It's gonna go over to Northwood Mountain, into the Potomac River and beyond as that prevailing wind goes. Why in the world would you even consider a place right next to town when you got 17 miles and nothing between here and Mount Storm? And Mount Storm got you guys may not be able to tell them what to do, but you sure can recommend it, and he's your man. And I don't see you doing that. I'm sitting up here, I'm gonna make a request of you. I want you to work for the citizens of West Virginia, not the industry.
And I'll put this,
David, Thank you all, I know your jobs are hard. Into the mic, please. Thank you, I know your jobs are hard, and I know you're just trying to do your jobs based on the confines of your job. And I think we'll all try our best to recognize that. My first question is, I read in the public comment notice, and then also in hearing what you've been talking about early on in the presentation. The purpose of these meetings is to collect public comment. The only outcome potential that I heard of it is if we are able to identify an error in the permit to be able to have any action from this meeting. Is that correct?
I wouldn't put it so tightly as that. Again, we get many comments that at times I have in the past that have caused changes to the permit, not denied. But we've changed the permit, we've added a more strict this or a more strict that, or additional monitoring, that happens. That's not infrequent. So it's not a binary, it's not like you've identified an error like fumigation and it goes away. There's many places between those two binary choices. So, and I do think, you know, we're humans too here. We feel the concern. We feel that visceral anger and all of that. And I mean, and that makes us want to review and make sure we haven't made any mistakes, and that we're doing everything possible within the confines of the law and precedent, procedure, staff, and everything. So I wouldn't classify it, no, that you have to identify an error to make this all worthwhile. No, I think there's many areas in between the two choices of we completely discount or it's denied. So hopefully that sheds some light.
How can we adequately perform that job of providing scrutiny to the permit if there's so much redaction and
Question?
Again, I think we're going over the CPI and the evaluation, and Jerry over this presentation. There's a legislative rule that outlines what can be claimed CPI and all the procedures. And we were so concerned that we decided to make sure that our legal counsel had a look at it. And they did. And using the law and using the methodology in there, we felt that they met the criteria that was necessary to keep that information confidential. That's been appealed. That may go in front of the air quality board, and they will have their take on it, and we'll see what they say. But our decision was, the DEP's decision, most specifically, legal counsel looking at it, that they had met the necessary requirements to keep that information confidential. Yeah, that's true. That was, of course, a fundamental David's original decision to redact that information. We only had to react to what they claimed was confidential using, again, the rules we have. We have no say on what they originally claim confidential.
I know that it hasn't been the precedent before to do, this sort of modeling in synthetic minor permits. But what would be the harm and why would you not do it when you're all requesting that? Raise your hand if you would like to formally request that. And let's get it.
I think we need to evaluate that, but, and again, I'm not going to speak directly to the decision, and that's the version manager, but, again, the reasons that we give for not requiring this is because of the precedent, timing, reminding sources, the timelines that we have by statute are very strict. And modeling takes a long time. It does. For a major source, you have twice as long to review a permit. And that's set by the legislature. That's the legislative rule. So for staffing, resources, cost, timing, we have always said that threshold, at the major minor source threshold.
So we would like to formally request and then offer to fund that as well, so if you could give us some dollars on that, we can start a fundraising. But we'd be grateful for that. It does have a little bit more, do you all debate the many sources that have documented the short-term and the long-term impacts that are created by criteria that you're pollutants? So we know that fossil fuel power plants are a major contributor to those. So premature mortality, lung cancer, asthma, heart attacks, cardiovascular disease, stroke, even cognitive decline, cancers. And that short-term and long-term impacts of PM 2.5 have been widely documented. Do you all debate that at all?
Again, as a staff of, what are we, 80 people in these days? 79 people in PAQ. We have 20 inspectors, we have 9 engineers, clerical staff, and so forth. We rely on the expertise of the EPA in setting the national air quality standards. If we had staff of 500, maybe we would set our own West Virginia standard. We don't. So we have to rely on those EPA standards and the procedures that may not be perfect, that are in place to keep ourselves in compliance with this.
So by presenting them, there's always a threshold of these impacts that will be happening if we are in a major source. So what I'm hearing from you is that essentially these impacts will happen with major source, but it's low enough under minor synthetic that we're not going to see these health impacts. That's the message that's coming across, and I don't think that's necessarily the message you're trying to put out there. But when we look at the fact that there hasn't been air dispersion modeling that's being done, and we're looking at this kind of intersection of minor synthetic and major, and what will be the realities for the people in this room, our older adults who are not here, our children who are asleep in their beds. And we think about how to kind of square that, long day, I'm losing my train of thought, but we think about how to square that, and essentially what you're trying to, what the message that's coming across is, that's 4,001 cigarette that gave you lung cancer. And it's not that cumulative effect overall of what's happened. And we know that you're not taking into this account, this air dispersed modeling, because you're not supposed to with finances, but I get it, you're trying to do your jobs. But the reality is that that exposure is going to be there for us, and we're very concerned about the conversion. And that's just not even a part of it. So this is essentially like hundreds of people having them plead for help. You know, you say you put all these permits through, and I get it, you're doing your job, but please help us. Please do the things that are within your control to help us. Because this company has already admitted they want to build the biggest data center, one of the biggest data centers in the world, and that they're planning on initially operating power plant at this level and then scaling it up. And so, I mean, to all of us, that really just shows that they're trying to skirt the regulations, and they're trying to do it in the way that you have to do. So, please listen.
Start by rejecting their synthetic minor status. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Next we have a Chris, Mark.
Hi, I would like to feel like my beloved community as people throughout the county town.
Next we have an Ann Felty.
See that?
Chris Jordan,
My questions have been asked already.
Justin Greer.
Alright. So my question comes into the folder that you guys use. What is the variable, what is that in terms of uptime of the system running at full capacity? Is that a 90% uptime, 95% uptime, 99, 85? So it's 60, 50 megawatts, right? Really tired of it. What is the total uptime, what's that variable?
So going back to the way that the emissions were calculated, it was based upon an hourly rate to remain a minor source. The configuration of the turbines is part of the information that would be confidential. So it would be impossible to answer that question without revealing confidential information.
Okay. So. My background, computer engineering degree, I worked in what we consider a network center. Those require a 99% or higher uptime. They do not shut down. When data centers run, they use every wattage of power between the GPUs, the CPUs, the memory banks, coolers they're going to need for the water, or we're going to have a serious heat soak problem with that water. The AC units, the pumps you're gonna need for your diesel containers, all of that cumulatively is gonna be, they're gonna be maxing those things out. Now, I know that they're gonna be running usually LNG, those two generators, or those generators, and then using diesel as backup. But they're gonna be cranking these things out at 99 to 100% capacity all the time. That's the reason why they're saying we're not hooking it up to a grid, because they're gonna be using all of it to go to that. So I don't know I know you can't give me confidential information, I understand that. But if your variable is 95% uptime, 90% uptime, your data set is flawed. And they will be above that number, because they're bouncing off the limit of their altitude, so to speak, of what they can do to factor in as a minor facility. That's the first question, and I know you can't really do too much because you can't release confidential information. I just want to put it out there that your formula is most likely flawed because of that. Secondly, who was the one that talked to Dan Parks? Because it says state officials touted the proposed site of the facility and concluded it is not anticipated that any noise and or viewership issues are being encountered. Now, I know we talked about the viewership. I know DB is not your specialty. You're the area. Has anyone, any models whatsoever to deal with the noise issue? I know they're your colleagues, and I know you guys communicate with one another. Like, so has anyone run any model for that whatsoever? And secondly, in terms of the stats might not come up in block, but these facilities are lit up like Christmas trees for security reasons. This is a portal 3 sky. If anyone does photography or uses a telescope in astronomy, you understand what the portal scale is. Here we're portal 3. Black water is a dark sky part. This facility will light up that sky, and the diffusion alone, especially if there's any moisture in the atmosphere, will turn this into a portal 5 or portal 6 sky, and you can forget about looking at the Milky Way or any dim stars. You might be able to see the planets or anything like that. Like I said, I know it's not your specialty, but has anyone done a noise study?
There has been no noise study done by the DEP, no. No, the noise is not regulated by the DEP, no.
Who for the state of
The county.
The county?
County. Okay.
You'll be a local ordinance, so you can reach out to, town, or mayor, in town, the county, the commission.
Next we have Reed Davis. Allison Isaacs. Sarah Nelson. I can come back to her in a minute. Dan Parks.
Hi, I'm Dan Parks, I publish Country Roads News. I normally wouldn't, speak at a meeting like this, but I don't get an opportunity to have, 3 state officials, 4 state officials in front of me, ever. So I'm going to take advantage and ask a couple of questions. My only agenda is to help this community provide as much information, is to provide as much information to this community as I can to help them make the best decision for them possible. I represent them and the people who are here as well, and just trying to give them the knowledge that they need to make good decisions that will affect their lives and their residents. The reference the previous gentleman made came from the engineer report that came out, where a statement was made that during your visit out there, you didn't see any, you didn't expect any light or view shed issues. I'm just wondering, since that's not within your purview, why you chose to make that statement?
Sure. So I did not say that there were many light issues. I said that we do not anticipate that there would be noise or view shed issues, not light.
Okay, yes, noise or usage. I'm just wondering kind of why you
So
chose
it's
to make those
been
comments.
common practice over the years, there's been topics that came up, amongst concerned citizens. So it's just been, a habitual, topic is about, went through the site inspection, indicated when the site inspection occurred, where the facility was located, whether or not it was, we met with anybody or it was, just that's speaking on the floor, sorry, whether or not there was, anyone there was moving alone. Also, just kind of indicated whether or not any equipment was on site, whether it's a greenfield site or there was equipment there already, so that we can note that in there. And so it's just been something over the years that we've included on whether or not, we would anticipate that there would be the, noise or view shed issues. But you are correct, we do not have any authority over those 2 items.
Okay, I'm wondering, though, since you did offer some of those responses outside of the purview of your organization, if you had any other thoughts on things like water usage or light pollution, since you commented on the other issues, if you had any other thoughts? Okay. You mentioned earlier in this presentation that there was an acreage for the facility listed in the application, is that correct?
Yes.
What is that acreage?
77-page application, I've been through some of that, I don't recall that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I didn't see it in there. If I reach out to you get that information.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you. And then one last question. You mentioned that because the end use of the power is not specified, that HB 2014 doesn't apply, is that correct?
What the statement that I made was because there's the in-power user is not definitive at this time, that there's a possibility exists that they would be subject to the acid rain provisions, and if so, then they would have to submit an acid rain permit. All right, it had no ties to HB 2014.
So does HB 2014 affect the ability of, for example, the county commission to develop this property?
That would be, you have to look at 2014 with this specifics are, that has nothing to do with our, absent of if 2014 never existed, it wouldn't change anything that we've done. Or any kind of review that we've done for the training.
Okay, all right, good to know.
Does that mean your regulations have got tighter and more strict then?
We have to wait to take minutes there, but data centers, and that's what it's.
That's one that, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it works comes in. Right now, I'm only there because they put the design power plant for just the heck of it.
Yeah.
Should that happen down the line, does that alter and become applicable to this power plant and their currently? Is that something that happens?
When you say should it happen, what, I mean, we've talked about so many things, but what do you mean by that?
a year from now, they received all of these permitting, and they continue, they start to construct, then they go, actually, it's going to be for a data center. Does that act fed into their power plant HB 2014, what they're being charged for, where the tax revenues are gonna be going, who's gonna have authority in governing all of that? Or does that only come applicable to the additional data centers that will be built, should they happen?
See, I think what they're doing is, they're coming in and saying, oh, don't think I'm major, I'm minor. So they can come in without the regulations, without y'all having to check how it's gonna affect our environment. And then they're gonna build it. So then it's just too late, it's already built it.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna say, oh, we're gonna put some data centers in. And since they put the data centers in, HB 2014 kicks in, which means that we can no longer regulate them. Because HB 2014
That is
says we
just
can't
saying
regulate
that
data centers.
HB 2014 has no effect on everything. They can come in today
Even for
and
data
say, even if it's today, they can come in today with an attached data center. I mean, we can talk a little bit about this. We should. A data center itself, as we know, is a bank of servers, computers. Itself, those don't produce by themselves any energy. So there's two broad classifications of data centers with respect to air emissions. Those that are connected to the grid, that have on-site backup power, usually in the form of engines, that have to get permitted. Or a microgrid situation where they have their own dedicated power plant that provides power to these days. The actual building, with servers and the data center itself, produces no air emissions other than potentially backup power from the grid-based data center, possibly some cooling. They have cooling towers for bigger ones, and potential for some particular event. So, starting from that point, if someone came in and said, we're building a power plant, and it is attached to three data centers, our review would be exactly the same, and air permitting wise, whether or not 2014, HB 2014 existed or not. It would change nothing about what we do. Now,
Jane, thank you for your. So you're about to regulate data centers.
They are.
with respect to what I just said, regulating data centers under air permitting, yes, we would still write an air permit for the backup generation for a data center that was connected to the grid. And we would still, again, if that data center is connected to a bank of turbines, or its own internal power plant, we're writing a permit for that power plant. The data center itself, again, doesn't produce the air emissions. Bunch of computers. So when you said we still regulate data centers, in the situation where we have a microgrid, we still regulate those turbines, just like we would if HB 2014 was there or not. All the rest of it, where the money goes, and all the other provisions of HB 24, I can't speak to. But the air permitting process is the same.
The fact that the air permitting process in alignment with the ownership and authority of who's gonna govern whether it's allowed or not, it kind of goes tandem, right? So like, we're trying to get an understanding of whether the air quality is gonna be good, but we also are trying to understand who's gonna be responsible for that. And right now, we aren't really sure. So part of our learning and discovery is when we put that out and get a direct answer and understand.
Exactly, and I said, we always encourage. That's all, it's encouraged, yeah, this is a really transparent with the community and the. You have zero authority to force that. You can't force them to come out and have a public meeting like this. We don't have input, we can't make them either. The entity that this permit, if issued, would be, was it fundamental data incorporated, whatever it is, LLC. They're gonna be responsible for the operation of the plant. If they're out of compliance, an MOU will be issued to that entity. They're responsible. Now, getting them, reaching out to them, we can encourage, but we can't force that kind of public interaction.
So HB 2014 provides exemptions from